I call to order the April 10th Board of Supervisors meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. We keep messing with the order of the agenda. We've decided to put the announcements first now because there's more people in the room, so why not? On Friday, April 12th, that's this Friday at 1:30, TMAC will be hosting its second annual press conference to announce the annual opening day of trails. Right here. If it's nasty weather, it'll be inside. Hopefully it'll be nice weather and it'll be out there by the edge of the trail. Please come at 1:30 this Friday. I thought it was 12:30.
I think they're having a networking function for TMAC, but then the Deputy Secretary for DCNR will be here to cut the ribbon, I believe.
Well, they told me to be here at 12:30, so if I have to wait for an hour, I'm going to be annoyed. Okay. It's either 12:30 or 1:30. Check the website.
The good news is it's supposed to rain Friday night, but
Okay.
Friday afternoon
Day's
should be
good?
fine.
All right, good. Second announcement, on Saturday, April 27th, Keep Pennsylvania Beautiful will have a cleanup effort throughout the township, including Swedesford Road between Church and Conestoga and Battle of the Clouds Park. If we get enough volunteers, we'll go to more places. For information, please contact Dante Bradley. Do we have this May 7th? Is that still going, Zach?
May 7th is still going. I think the other announcement that was on there got taken off.
All right, I'll read. On May 7th, Tuesday, at 7 p.m., the Township's Open Space Plan Advisory Committee will be holding a Places of the Heart open house for Open Space Park and Recreation Plan. It's open to the public. It will not be held here. It will be held at the Covenant Presbyterian Church, which is on 400 Lancaster Avenue. Everybody knows where it is. Please RSVP to Brittany. Brittany's not here tonight? Okay. She's on the website. She's in the township. And the County Commissioner's Office announced the PPP awards on April 4th, and the township was awarded $446,736 for Spring Ridge and $86,100 for Balderston property. These are vacant lands that we are attempting to purchase for the township.
As open space.
They run between 401 north of Phoenixville Pike up to the Turnpike and across to, there's a little piece of it that comes out on Phoenixville Pike. It's up on the hillside. All right. Into board motions and resolutions. Oh. Oh, good. Flyers, good. That's always helpful. Then people can take it home and remember it. That's
Yes,
great.
there's going to be interactive events within the program.
Great.
I assume that is or will be on the township's internet site, I'm sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Good. All right. Announcements are complete. Into motions and resolutions. We will consider 3 extensions of time on the following applications. The first one is Bishop Tube. This is we all know what this is about. We're looking for an extension till August 30th, 2019. Questions?
Deborah Mobio, 42 Village Way. I have a comment, as usual. I recently tried to review the most current documents within the East Whiteland website dedicated to the development of the Bishop Tube site on Mayland Road. I continue to have questions and concerns when it comes to the township's handling of what has become a quagmire. I feel like I am trapped in the movie Groundhog Day. I am sure that I am asking the same questions and raising the same concerns that I have previously. This new proposal does not address the community's concerns, which have continually been raised for over 2 years now. From what I can see, and stop me if I'm wrong, this plan does nothing to address the full and total cleanup and remediation of the Bishop Tube site. Based on current facts, science, law, approving the development of the Bishop Tube site is unsafe and unsupportable. We do not need to wait for a report to know that removing a few inches of soil is not total remediation and cleanup. As Township Supervisors, you are responsible for the safety and welfare of the citizens of East Whiteland Township. This includes the citizens who live next to the toxic site, like me, the citizens who live downstream in the toxic plume and beyond, and any future citizens that might be duped into buying one of the 96 proposed homes on the Bishop Tube land. More specifically, I am referring to those responsibilities which are outlined in the Pennsylvania State Constitution. As elected officials within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, is it not your duty to follow the Constitution of our state? And I quote from the Constitution, "The people have the right to clean air, pure water, and the preservation of the natural, scenic, historic, and aesthetic values of the environment. Pennsylvania's public natural resources are the common property of all people, including generations to come." Furthermore, the East Whiteland Township ordinances prohibit the approval of the current proposal. According to the East Whiteland Township Subdivision Land and Development Ordinance, you are charged with the preservation and protection of public health, safety, and general welfare. And you are charged to assure that land to be developed will be of such a character that it can be used safely without danger to health or peril from fire, flood, erosion, smoke, or other menace. Rather than ask for an extension, it is your civic duty to say no. The development as proposed does not preserve the health and welfare of the citizens of East Whiteland Township. Until a full and total remediation is completed and we can fully assess the remaining damage, no plans for development should be considered or evaluated. The Pennsylvania Constitution and your duties as township supervisors prohibit anything other than denial at this time. Just say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Do you want to say anything about it?
I'm happy to address that now, unless there's additional comments along the same line. Maybe it'd be better if there's anybody else that has anything to say.
Okay.
Well, the issue is that there is a land development process. And in order to make proper decisions, for this board to make proper decisions on any application, they do want to look into a lot of those issues, if not most of all those issues that you brought up. In order for them to do that, they need to rely on the consultants and the experts who need to review the plans and the details. And as you mentioned, in some aspects it is a quagmire. It's very complicated. It's too complicated for me to review, and it's too complicated for this board to review in and of itself. That's why they rely on the experts that have this technical knowledge, this technical background. We need to act in good faith in reviewing any plans to see if there are any deficiencies in the plans or if it meets the plans. In order to do that, we need the proper time to evaluate the plans. At this time, we don't have all of that information ready yet. Under the municipality's planning code, we have 90 days to do that. If we don't do it within 90 days, guess what? That plan is deemed approved. And that isn't something that this board would like to see done. So what has to be done in order for an extension to be given is that Bishop Tube actually gives this board additional more time to review the plan, so it's not a deemed approval.
Let him finish.
The applicant, whoever the applicant is. It'd be the applicant of the land development process. So, it's not Bishop 2, correct. I'm looking at the agenda. The Constitutional Drive Partners, the applicant who applied for the land development process for what is seen or commonly referred to as the Bishop 2 property, which is what we're all talking about today. So yes, it is the applicant that submitted that plan. They are the ones that provided the extension for allowing us to make those reviews, and we're going to take that time because it has to be done right. It has to be done in good faith. So that is why, you know, this extension has been granted to us, and it's just a matter of whether this board would like to accept that extension in order to have the opportunity to fully review the plans. Well, waste of this board's time. And we'll have to make that evaluation. And maybe, if you're correct, maybe there's additional reasons that this plan should be denied. We don't know at this time. And again, that's what needs to be evaluated fully.
Okay. Come up if you want.
Yeah, we really need people to come up and speak
right.
to the microphone because
Okay.
it's being recorded.
In everything that we're talking about, too, I'm very aware of the fact that the DEP has something to say about this, that you are also waiting for their assessment. It is a toxic site. It has been designated a toxic site. And I think my thing that makes it more black and white, which I don't understand the legalities of it, but for me it makes it more black and white knowing that we have a constitutional right for clean air, clean water, and an environment. And it is that stream that runs through that is an exceptional value stream that's going to the Valley Creek, Schuylkill, into the Delaware River. I'm speaking from a mother who has a daughter with 3 brain tumors. I live on Flawnstock Road, and I was pregnant during the time that that site was active. And I'm very concerned about what that toxicity is doing to the people downstream, or if we were to say yes to that land being developed, how that affects them and my neighborhood. But I'm very aware of the fact that the Constitution is above the law. The Constitution is the law. If in our Constitution it says that this is our right, then what's the question? Why is there a question that someone was allowed to develop on a toxic site if the Constitution says that I have the right to clean air, clean water? I don't know if I'm asking for an answer, but it seems to me that the Constitution is above the law. The Constitution is the law. And if that is my constitutional right, then that land should not be developed on.
We're not approving it.
We're not
But
there
it
not
keeps
yet.
approving
going. This is my point. But what as a citizen who this township has always been developmental friendly. And we tried to stop CubeSmart from being built in our neighborhood and asking for a park there. And at that point, we were laughed at. So I hear what you say, but as a citizen of this community, it's a lot of work to say, so why can't you just tell them no? I mean, I understand he owns the land. I understand that. But you're not saying yes, I understand that, but you're giving him extension, extension, extension. And when is it okay for us to say, no, this is done?
In order to say no, there has to be a basis to say no.
It's toxic land. Why isn't that the basis to say no?
Because under the law, and I don't want to get into the details with you, but you're assuming under the Constitution, and you're citing the environmental protection rights of the Constitution. If the DEP doesn't think that it's toxic land, and I'm not sure what they're going to feel, then that is sort of a non-starter for this board.
Have
We
you,
need
have you
to get
guys talked to the
details.
DEP? It is under their thing as a toxic site. It is on their website as a toxic
but-
site. I
but
don't
the-
understand.
The DEP has standards that are set up for the state for any remediation. But again, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. There's not going to be any digging of dirt, any movement until,
there has been.
until we know what's going to come up.
Yeah.
So this is a question of knowing what is really able to be done with that property and under the law, under our codes, under the issues that are with the property, really getting the details and the facts right before any decisions are really made. And that's the reason for the need for the extension right now, based upon the changes that have come with the plan.
The plan is still on the toxic site. Those buildings that he wants, the 93 units, are still on that toxic spot. So I don't, like Deb said, I don't understand why it extends instead and extends. I don't know it. My other issue is the piece of land where the Boy Scouts do their, selling their trees, their Christmas trees, across the street. And that's a toxic site as well. Is there an issue of why that's
Are
not
you-
being, I know Mr.
are you-
O'Neill owns that as well.
Are you saying, is that position based on the assumption that that's where the
Well, the creek
groundwater-
goes through
The
there.
groundwater plume goes
Yeah.
under it?
And is that being investigated in any way of, like, where's the plume going? Where?
Well, the Rue Associates is doing that long-term water study, and that's been ongoing for quite a while. Environmental is primarily under the DEP.
I understand that, but then every time I see this land is for sale, we know it's toxic. In this township, we know the DEP is looking at that. Like, when do we as a township said, this isn't for sale until, and whoever owns it now, what was that building down the road that it was a historic building, and I remember sitting at the township meeting and you told the owner, you know what, you bought a lemon. The importer, thank you. You bought a lemon. You know, you can't build on the land. You bought something that was toxic. You thought you'd get away with it. You
I don't
can't
think
do
that
it.
importer's
No, the
toxic.
issue-
Importer's not toxic.
No, that's not my
Historic,
point,
yeah.
Susan. My point is that, yeah, that
Right.
is the historical committee and everything, but that ultimately, whatever that piece of land was about, it was because, for whatever reason, and your response to him is you bought something knowing you couldn't do A, B, and C on that land.
Right.
My point being is Constitutional Partners also bought something that A, B, and C can't be done on that land.
Well, that's not entirely clear yet.
Well,
If
I
it's
think it's
cleaned
clear
up,
enough when
if
the
it's cleaned,
DEP says it's toxic,
I
and it's
know.
on their site. The EPA's site even says that it's toxic land. It's on their site.
we're not disputing that it's toxic land.
So-
Nobody disputes it's toxic land.
So your point being what?
So why would we, nobody's going to build on toxic land. We're not going to
Then
approve,
why are we playing this game? That's
we're
taking
not
so
playing
much
a
effort?
game. We're
The-
waiting for a cleanup plan, and the DEP drives that.
So then, Brian O'Neill, you can't build on this land until, why is he able to keep coming with extensions?
The excruciatingly painful
Yes, thank you,
truth
Richard.
of this whole thing is the land development process itself. And that's put into law under the Constitution.
But
you
the
know, as
Constitution is
state-
above
As
that.
state law.
But the Constitution is
Consti-
above that state law.
And that could be a basis at the time of decision to use.
Okay.
But the process, it's painful, it's long, it's
It's exhausting.
exhausting, yeah.
But we're not.
It's
we're not-
exhausting.
It
We're
is.
okay.
It's
We'll
exhausting
keep
for
fighting.
you guys. Believe me, it's exhausting for us.
If this board wanted to use that constitutional amendment as a basis, they wouldn't be able to do so right now because they're only relying on, and I don't mean to be demeaning, but
They wouldn't.
your opinion. But
Did you say they wouldn't be able to use it?
they wouldn't be able to use it in good faith right now because they don't have the tools, the basis, the studies, the research, the things that they
It's
need
on
to
the
allow
DEP and EAP. It's on their website saying it's a toxic piece of land. Isn't that enough to say that?
No, it's not.
Wow,
It's
not-
okay.
not
All right,
at-
And that's where
Really?
we're
Not.
speaking about the need for the land development process.
Not at this time.
Not,
I
Not
don't
at- not
understand
this
that. I
moment.
truly don't understand that. If our Environmental Protection Agency says it's toxic land, that's not enough to say you can't build on this?
correct.
Wow, okay.
At this time.
Anybody else? All right, I think if there's no other comment, we'll have to take a vote on the extension. Can I get a motion? Go ahead. It's an easy one. Oh, yeah, Rich, I don't care.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to authorize the acceptance of the extension for Constitution Drive Partners for the Bishop Tube Land Development Plan until August 30, 2019.
Do I have a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have another extension for HP Flanagan Backton Way. This is preliminary subdivision. They'd like extension, or we need an extension till June 30th. Any questions on this one? This is what, 6 houses up on Backton Hill? I guess they need more time, or we need more time, or something.
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think they're cleaning up the plans. They want to go check in with the historical commission and talk with them just to kind of give them an update on where things are. And in order to do that, they need a little more time to sort of go from meeting to meeting. So it's really just a procedural extension at this point.
Any comment from the public on that one? All right, you want to make a motion?
Sure. Make a motion to extend Resolution 2018-10-SD for HB Flanagan Backton Way for a preliminary subdivision until June 30th, 2019,
Do I have a-
to render decision.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And this one, is this an extension, or is this a conditional use hearing we're going to have, Zach?
Oh, no, this is an extension in order to open the hearing. So basically, MPC says you have 60 days from the date of application to open the hearing. They weren't ready for April, let's say, for this month, so we're going to have it in May, in theory.
Okay, so,
So just an extension in order to hold the hearing.
yeah, we haven't seen much on this, but somebody's made an application to do a rock gym behind the fireplace store.
Exactly. They went to the planning commission last month, and there was some commentary, some back and forth. So they're going to provide a little more information in advance of another visit to the planning commission, and then they'll be in theory
I'm
in
not
April.
sure we
and then
have ordinances about rock gyms, but we'll figure it out.
We don't, and that's part of the fun.
Okay, all right. So, you want to make a motion on that one, Rich?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to extend the time to hold the conditional use hearing for 2019-05-CU for Rock Gym until May 15th, 2019.
Do I have a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right. On more fun stuff, we have been talking about the township making donations to charitable organizations that do a lot for the community. We have two in front of us tonight, one for People's Light and the other for the Great Valley Community Organization. I think we had talked around $1,500 each,
Correct.
you think? I think that'd be great. Anybody have any comment on that? All right. Want to make a motion for one or both?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to authorize donation to both People's Light and Theater and Great Valley Community Organization from East Whiteland Township for $1,500 each.
Do I have a second?
You have a second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Oh, no, 1,500.
1,500. 1,500 each. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. You're welcome. Street improvements. Talk to us about street improvements, Bill.
This is our annual paving project that we're going to put out for bid. I can name the streets if you want to go through them.
Might be interested in what streets are coming up to be paved.
Okay. We're going to do an area up around the Summit Road area where Aqua just completed a water main replacement project. And the way that works is they actually pay for half of the road to be milled and overlaid. So we'll mill the full road, and half of the cost will be paid by Aqua. Those streets that are included in that project were Madeline, Queen Anne, Kevin, Carroll between King and Summit, Summit Road between Carroll and 352. And then while we're right in that area, we're going to pick up Woodcrest. That's not part of the Aqua project, but we're going to complete that little corner of the township right there. Other streets are Village Way from the cul-de-sac back out just about to the General Warren Inn. And in that area, we're also going to do Fawnstock from Longview to Lantern, and Olive Lantern, and also Longview. The other roads are Ravine Road at the top section.
Oh, boy, that needs it.
Yeah. And also Old Moore Hall, the little piece, it's a one-way piece that comes in off of 29 and drops down into the back of the corporate center at Lap. That's in really bad condition. We had not paved that because that was part of when Liberty was going to redo the corporate center, that road was going to go away. That was going to be, so that's why, it's in really bad shape. We don't normally let a road get that bad, but that's why we hadn't paved it up until this point. So that one will be done too.
Okay. And when are you going to start this?
Daryl's,
Does King Road then fall under the county or the state?
the state.
Because there's also Walker Barn and we walk
Yeah,
down that.
that's not a township road, so that would be up to PennDOT, what they're going to do with King Road. Correct, correct. Get back to your question. We're putting the bid documents together now. I think we're getting close here to get it out for bid, but
Okay, so by June meeting, we'll know who's going to, what prices we got and everything.
correct,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Do you want to, is it a short question? I mean, nothing's getting recorded and,
We're going to mill that out. We did look at your side. I think the way we're putting those bid documents together for that side of the road is to actually mill deeper on that side to open up some of the reveal on that curve. So, yeah. Yeah, normally we do 1.5 inch mill, and then we put back 1.5 inches, but what we've done on that particular road is to determine, I think we're planning on going about 3 inches on the mill at the curb line, and it'd be 1.5 inches in the center. So that would, and then put 1.5 inches back in. So that would drop it down a couple inches there. So,
All of us on that side have a barrier
Lip.
from the water that just comes
Right.
flying down.
right.
So
If we,
last time they totally took that away from my driveway too.
last time it was paved,
Chase them down and ask them to put another barrier, because when I had my driveway done, I had that put in. Did the road, they took it out.
I think the last time that road was paved, the water company, they put new water mains in there, and Aqua was actually the last ones to pave that section, but we are aware of your problem there. Yep.
okay, any other comments on paving roads? So this is just a motion to advertise. Whose turn is it?
I think it's mine here.
Okay,
Just make a motion to advertise for street improvements projects for 2019 with a projected completion by May, or to
no.
advertise by May, or June, by June.
we'll have the prices by June.
Yeah.
Right,
The bids.
The
We'll have
bids,
The bids
the
by
bids.
June, or advertised now. Right,
Okay.
okay, right.
do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Should we send the solicitor to the zoning hearing board for something with Elcor? Is that yours, Steve, or?
I say no.
I say no too.
What it is you'll remember that this property was subdivided and Elcor is building the Sweetsford Square apartment buildings, and they were requesting a special exception to allow 2 relatively small freestanding or monument signs. The ordinance would only allow 1, but they're asking for 2. It's a pretty big property.
they're actually very relatively short and small signs, and so, yeah, I don't think it's worth
Sounds like.
sending the solicitor.
Yeah, I think the zoning hearing board's up to that one. What do you think, guys?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed, yeah.
All right. Then we don't have to do anything, right? We can just say, no, we're not sending them. Okay.
Good stuff.
All right, now some more good things. We need a motion to approve the resolution to authorize the submittal of the DCNR grant. This is like a grant for us to get money to build the Backton Hill Park. Okay.
Make a motion on it.
How much are we asking for here?
$250,000.
Ooh, good money. All right. And that's a match, right? It's a 50-50 match?
It is, but we'll be providing for roughly $400,000. The first phase is almost exactly $650,000.
It's going to be a nice park. Okay.
What's our current timing, you think, where we will see progress, actually dirt moving? End of the summer?
No, they don't even get to the awards until the late summer or fall. So, in the webinar that I watched, basically they said this time next year.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
Could we start the park before, if we wanted to, and then get reimbursed from the
We
county?
won't know if we're going to get the grant.
True.
I can check with DEP, I mean DCNR. Typically the answer is no. They don't like you doing any work ahead of time. If you do it, you're not going to be reimbursed for it, so.
Right.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
we might as well ask, right?
We can certainly ask, yeah, no harm in that.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. Who's turn to make a motion on this one? Can you do that?
Well, yeah, I'll make a motion to, I approve, the township approve the resolution to authorize the submittal of the DCNR grant for construction of Backton Hill Park for $250,000.
Okay, do I have a second?
You have a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You're welcome. Very similar language, approve a resolution to authorize submittal of a DCNR grant for acquisition of the Balderston property. Okay. That was the one I announced earlier on. Oh, no, this is an additional grant, isn't it?
Yeah, this is, the one you announced early on is funds that have already been awarded from Chester County.
This is an additional
To,
grant.
right, and
Okay.
so this would be additional funds from the DCNR to acquire the very same two properties, which ultimately, if both are awarded, it would reduce our costs to 10% of the purchase price.
Yeah, I don't think it gets any better than that, so that's great. Can we,
This particular grant is, we're asking for $84,850 for the Balderston piece, and we'll get to another one, so I'll just give you that number. The Spring Ridge property is significantly larger, and so we're requesting $457,286.
okay. All right. You want to make a motion? You got those
Sure.
numbers? All right. You can do the one for Balderston first.
Yeah. Make a motion to approve resolution to authorize submittal of the DCNR grant for acquisition of the Balderson property in the amount of $84,850.
850. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, got a question. Come up to the thing. Sorry.
It's just a question, and maybe my ignorance is, so we're purchasing these properties as a township?
Yes.
And for what reason?
Open space.
Open space, just awesome, awesome, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. You want to do the same thing for Spring Ridge?
Sure. Motion to approve resolution to authorize submission to DCNR of a grant for acquisition of Spring Ridge property, which is adjacent to the Balderson property, for $450-some thousand.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We haven't purchased it. We're looking for money to purchase it. It has not been purchased. We're not purchasing it until we get the money. Got it?
I do, yeah.
Okay, I'm saying that into the microphone, so it's in the record. All right. All right, the next one I don't know about, bench donation.
Yeah, a township resident had contacted Bill Steele some time ago about donating a bench for one of our parks, and it's taken a little time to wind its way here. But it's been to the Park and Rec Board, and they recommended that we accept the donation. And so now it's up to the board. The resident would like to put it in Valley Creek Park. We don't know exactly what kind of bench or the location, but that's something she knows that she'll work with, primarily Bill and to some degree me on the selection of the bench and the location. But we recommend that we accept the donation.
I don't see any
Does
reason why
the
we
donor
wouldn't.
wish to remain anonymous?
I didn't ask her that question, so maybe not announce her name
Okay.
this evening,
Not
'cause
until
that's a
you
good
ask,
question,
yeah.
but I didn't ask.
Is this part of like a Scout, Eagle Scout type project? This is just a,
No, it's a
Interested
memorial.
resident.
It's a memorial bench. I believe it's for someone from her family.
All right, I can't imagine why we would refuse the donation of a bench. Any public comment on that? All right. Whose turn? Your turn to make a motion.
motion to accept the bench donation for Valley Creek Park.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, approve the 2018 CAFR fund balance assignments. That sounds like John.
Yes. The independent CPAs auditors have completed the draft of the CAFRs, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the Township for 2018. We have, let me just get the numbers here. We have a total of almost $13.9 million that is in fund balances in general fund, capital improvement, other governmental funds. With this total amount, the staff is recommending some additional assignments as well as some shifting of assignments in funds. And just to highlight, about $500,000 going into the highway fund that we talked about a few minutes ago. Fire apparatus, we've achieved our commitment to that assignment, so that's no longer needed, so that became unassigned and to be used for another purpose. The stormwater management for federal and state purposes is getting more intense, and so the staff recommends to the board that we appropriate $500,000 to that purpose. Volunteer committee resources, which includes open space, park board, EAC, historical commission, planning commission, and I think that about covers it. We're recommending the appropriation or the assignment of $500,000 to that purpose. Renovate municipal infrastructure with the additions that this staff is recommending. That assignment increases to a total of $3 million even. And then there's some minor adjustments, one for a budgetary reserve that amounts to about $32,000, and there's about $3,600 for rounding. So that makes up the changes to the assigned balances that staff is recommending to the board this evening.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Do you have any questions?
No, it's fine.
Any questions from the audience? All right. Scott, maybe make a motion on that one?
So make a motion to approve the 2018 CAFR fund balance assignments as outlined by John.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, we have a request from our friends at Great Valley School District. They're doing extensive concrete repair at the Great Valley Middle School, and they're asking if we would waive the fee, which is $27,000. We consider this. They very generously allow us to use the schools every summer for our camp program at no charge, so I think it's very fair that we grant them a waiver of this fee.
And it's very common for municipalities to grant school district waivers of fees because they are taxpayer dollars.
Sure, sure. Okay. But it's our fee because it's happening in our township. Okay. No, we can't ask Charlestown to pay for it, I'm sorry. All right.
We can ask, but
We can ask, it won't happen.
I bet I know the answer.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve Great Valley School District's request to waive the permit fee for concrete repair at the middle school for $27,000.
Do I have a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good. Okay. Going into public hearings. First one is changing the ordinance. This is the drop for the firefighters.
Yeah, we're actually going to have to postpone this to our May meeting. Oversight on my part. We had gotten the draft ordinance together and ran it by someone in Joe's office, and unfortunately, we did not advertise that, so we're going to need to advertise that for the next board meeting.
Okay, so we're postponing a decision on that until May.
That's
All right.
correct.
Okay. Next one, zoning ordinance amendment to provide for uniform off-street parking space dimensions and aisle widths. This is we talked about many times.
Sure.
You
At
wanna
this
talk about
time,
that?
sure. At this time, we'll adjourn the public meeting and into the public hearing on this ordinance. And this is an ordinance amending the township zoning ordinance to provide for uniform off-street parking spaces and aisle widths. I'm going to mark a number of exhibits. The first one is Board Exhibit 1, the ordinance itself. Board Exhibit 2 is the legal notice for tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 3 is the proof of publication for tonight's hearing in the daily local newspaper on March 20th and 27th of 2019. Board Exhibit 4 is the proof of submission to the Chester County Law Library that was done on March 7th, 2019. Board Exhibit 5 is the submission of the ordinance to the Chester County Planning Commission on March 7th. And Board Exhibit 6 is the submission to the East Whiteland Planning Commission, also done on March 7th, 2019. At this time, I'll turn this over to Mr. Barner to give a summary of the changes and the reasons for this ordinance amendment.
Sure, yeah, as the name here would I think sort of summarizes, we're looking to establish some uniform dimensions for our parking stall requirements. Currently, there's different overlays in different districts that have varying, not entirely different, but varying stall dimensions that are required. This would seek to establish a uniform 9x18 dimension and also establish dimensions for angle parking, which is not entirely uncommon, but currently our code does not really address that in any way. It also establishes aisle widths relative to the, and so it's for each angle of the parking, whether it's 90 degree, traditional head in, 60 or 45 or parallel. There are stall depths, line lengths, aisle widths, whether it's one way or two way. There are also some additional requirements for whether it's a driveway or a garage that seeks to take credit for that towards their off-street parking requirement. It would just require that they comply with the dimensional requirements that we've outlined here. So fairly standard, really, I would say more of an ordinance cleanup item. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. This has gone around a couple different iterations, but I think this is hits sort of all the high points that have kind of come up over the...
This is part of your general cleanup and consistency work that you're working on?
Yep. Yeah, I think the idea is clean up categories, comprehensive, just to make sure that we're kind of getting the most urgent things taken care of. And I would say this one is sort of toward the top of that list.
Any questions from the audience about this? You probably heard us talk about this for a while now. Any comments?
This was advertised last month already.
Correct. Yeah, this has actually been talked about a couple times over the past couple of months, and we just keep catching other little things we thought we might as well just lump on. So that's the nature of it. But yeah, I think this puts us in good shape for now,
Parking.
before we revisit maybe some of our general parking standards.
And
Okay.
this clarifies what are currently inconsistencies within our own ordinance.
That was the original intent, and we also found some other things we just wanted to clean up while we were at it. But yeah, mostly it was just inconsistent in different districts.
Okay.
So are there any comments or anyone from the public have any opinions? Hearing and seeing none, any questions from the board?
No?
Hearing and seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and this ordinance is now in a position to be voted upon.
All right. Okay. Who wants to make a motion to approve this ordinance change? Is that you, Scott? Your turn?
So I make a motion to amend zoning ordinance to provide for uniform off-street parking spaces and aisle widths under ordinance number 310.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, got that one done. All right, John, back to you. This one's about, this was about the solar energy permits.
That is correct. At this time, we will again adjourn the public meeting and back into a public hearing, this time on a hearing on the ordinance that amends the zoning code, the chapter addressing wind and solar energy systems, to remove the special exception requirement for solar energy systems. I'm going to mark a number of exhibits. The first one is Board Exhibit 1, the ordinance itself. Board Exhibit 2, the legal notice of tonight's hearing. Board Exhibit 3 is the proof of publication of that legal notice in the Daily Local on March 20th and March 27th of 2019. Board Exhibit 4 is the proof of submission to the Chester County Law Library, which was done on February 21st. Board Exhibit 5 is proof of submission to the Chester County Planning Commission, again done on February 21st. And Board Exhibit 6 is the submission on February 18th to the East Whiteland Planning Commission. I think it should be made aware that the purpose of this ordinance was due to a requirement that residents seeking to do solar panels for their residential houses only had to go through a special exception requirement, which included an additional application to the zoning hearing board, additional fees. My understanding is that the board wants to be as environmentally friendly as possible and to encourage such alternative uses of electricity or energy, wanted to remove that obstacle. So that's essentially what this does. This does not impact a commercial use or permit a commercial use of a solar field. The solar panels are only used to power that property primarily, although I do believe there's the ability, and I could defer to Mr. Barner, who's much more versed in this ordinance, of selling excess electricity back to the system, and because this is just addressing accessory uses to the solar energy systems, and there are still additional requirements and conditions that need to be met in order to obtain the permits to install those panels. Mr. Barner, is there anything else regarding this ordinance?
No, it's really just the removal of that special exception going through the hearing process. All of the, like you said, all the citing standards and all of that will remain. That may be something we revisit in the future to make sure that they're as modern as possible. I think they were written a number of years ago. So again, something we can revisit future as part of these cleanup and categorical revisions. But really, it's just, I think it's just been viewed as a little onerous, not only just cost, but time in order to get something we generally would like to see in the township. So.
My understanding was for all the ones we've had, we've never denied any of them, so it does seem kind of onerous to charge a fee and require the special hearing.
In general, I think we'd still have them consult their homeowners association or any other group like that that would maybe have purview in another way outside of what our code specifically calls out.
And for the hearings that have had to be held at zoning, was there ever even any objection?
I can't speak to that specifically. I know that I'm sure there are times where neighbors come out to just hear specific.
Find out.
Steve, I don't know if you have any more specifics on that, but
I would think not, but
Well, one occurrence, in the last 2 years, we've probably had a dozen of these applications, and only one time did one neighbor come out and raise some questions.
okay.
And I think it should also be clarified that this is only for the solar panels and not for the wind systems, which is found. That is still going to require a special exception. Obviously, there are more aspects of that need to be reviewed. Does the public have any questions or comments regarding this ordinance amendment? I see 2 people in favor of the ordinance amendment, for the record. Does the council have any questions? Supervisors? No? Hearing and seeing none, we will close this public hearing, and now this ordinance is in a position to be voted upon now that we are back in the public meeting.
All right, do I have a motion to approve this ordinance change?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 311, amending the zoning ordinance to remove the requirement to obtain special exception approval for solar energy systems.
Do I have a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Good, getting some good work done tonight. Okay, now we're into needing draft resolutions for subdivision and land development. And first would be the Frame Avenue Twin.
Sure, I can give you a little overview of this if you'd like, or we can defer, turn it over to the applicant's engineer. This is basically an existing lot that the applicant is seeking to build a twin house on. The review letters are relatively light at this point, I would say. The applicant has delineated some trees and shown which, I guess I could pull up the plan, couldn't I? Sure.
Let him present it. Okay, all right, whoever wants to go.
So I guess what I would say is that many of the comments that we had were presented at the Planning Commission meeting have since been addressed. They're currently under review. I don't see anything in here specifically that would preclude the solicitor drafting an approval resolution. But if there's anything that Vic would like to add, I'll let him do so.
Just talk up if you would, I'm sorry. It doesn't get recorded unless you do.
All right, Vic Kelly with Commonwealth Engineers, and as Zach said, we have minor items that we needed to address, and we agree to comply with all the outstanding engineering comments, consulting comments, and in fact, we've addressed a lot of the comments, resubmitted the plans, they just haven't had a chance to review them yet, so hopefully between now and the time the resolution is drafted, we'll have all those things cleaned up.
All right, any questions from the audience on this one? Scott, Rich? We're all good? All right. So make a motion to draft a resolution? Whose turn is it? I forget.
So make a motion to draft a resolution. Draft a resolution for the next month. For the following subdivision, the 2019-01-SD for Frame Avenue Twin, preliminary final subdivision.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Next up, we have Swedesford South Backton Hill Road, preliminary final subdivision.
Yeah, this is taking one lot to create 3. This is, I guess it's an institutionally zoned property that had a number of different uses proposed over the years. This currently is just a subdivision application, so any future land development there would have to come back through for a land development process. I don't know if, Greg, if there's anything you'd like to add on timing or anything like that. Otherwise, I think the review letters are relatively clean. And
This is just a redrawing the lines. I don't know, Greg, do you want to say anything?
I have nothing else to add.
You have questions?
No, I don't.
Anybody in the audience have questions?
yeah, sure, I can bring it up. Sorry, I'm a little out of sync tonight, huh? As if that's much better than not having a picture at all. I can zoom in if you like. I'm not sure if you're able to see my mouse, but towards the top, you see Swedesford Road kind of going in a diagonal manner. Malvern Hunt would be on the northern side. You can kind of see the building footprints there. There are sewer lagoons. There are those sort of ovular shaped pieces. This would be the portion just south of the trail then that would be just dividing the land into 3 separate parts.
Any other questions from anybody?
The lagoons are still owned by the township, right?
Correct, yeah, they basically, Malvern Hunt flows down towards those are treated and then pumped back up into a spray irrigation field north
Right.
of the community, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no questions, then you want to make a motion on that one? This is just a resolution
Sure.
to approve.
Motion to authorize a solicitor to draft resolution for Swedesford South Backton Hill Road preliminary final subdivision number 2019-06.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Now we have actual approval of the following subdivision and land development applications. The first one is Fraser Lanes redevelopment preliminary final. Do we have somebody here for that, or is that just? There you go. Okay.
Good evening, Allison Zara on behalf of the Fraser Lanes redevelopment. Last month, the board heard a presentation about this proposed development. It's an apartment structure on Lancaster Avenue. The address is several different properties combined, and we've received a draft approval resolution, and the applicant does accept the conditions. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
What were the main conditions we had on that? Do you know, John? Did you have anything that might be of interest in particular?
I think the most unique condition to this project is the agreement to offer for dedication a portion of the property, which would be on the left side of the property, for the Plainbrook Road extension, if that project was to be done in the future. Again, due to certain conditions, it's actually one of the most elaborate conditions I've ever seen in a resolution.
Thank you.
That is to show that it was done correctly. But everything else is pretty much the standard of paying the park and rec fee, the open space fee, in the upwards of $624,000, and the traffic impact fee of $117,000. There was 2 waivers requested, and these have been discussed. I'm not sure if they were discussed at the last meeting or not. One of them is a standard one, and one of them is for a removal of more than 20% of the trees. But at the Planning Commission, and again, I'm not sure if this was discussed at the last meeting, a lot of those trees are dying or not in the best condition. So it was, I believe, recommended that those waivers to be granted under the circumstances.
Any questions from the public on this plan? All right.
There's one in the back.
Come on up. I didn't see it, but come on up.
While she's coming up, the fees have to be paid in order for the plan to be recorded, correct?
The 209 fee has to be paid prior to the use and occupancy permit, according to Act 209. But the park and rec fee is prior to recording of the plans.
All right.
I guess my question is if the Malvern Meeting House is going to be part of this?
No, it's not part of it.
Okay, how about the little gas station there?
That's not part of it either.
That's not part of it?
The
Okay.
gas station is this piece right here. I don't know if you can see on the
I think they would have
TV.
been happy to take it, but it
Yeah,
didn't work out.
okay, thank you. Oh, Thelma Shields.
What was it?
Thelma Shields.
Thelma Shields, okay. Any other questions?
Would you want to comment on any other property that you might be taking or building? Just for the audience.
What's actually being redeveloped as part of this. So this includes Fraser Lanes. It includes the mobile home park next door. There's also a property that contains a bar, and I believe the other property is a hair salon, or former hair salon, and there's a corner and a sort of, I was going to say there's some type of grocery store, yes. So it's a assemblage of properties. Fraser Lanes would be on the right side of the plan, then the mobile home park, and then the little piece that sticks out behind the gas station is the other 3 properties that I mentioned.
Okay.
What are the border lines of the entire property?
Sure, so on the top of the plan is Route 30.
Yes, I'm looking at the whole.
Yeah, and then behind, sort of on the bottom of the plan, that would back up to the railroad. And then on sort of the left-hand side of the plan, you see what is shown as a proposed right-of-way. That would be an extension of Plainbrook Road that would align with Plainbrook Road. That right-of-way is not proposed to be put in as part of this application now, and the condition that the solicitor was referring to earlier relates to if the right-of-way is assembled to create that full right-of-way for an extension of Plainbrook Road. My client has agreed to dedicate the portion that would be its half to the township to allow Plainbrook Road to be extended there. There are 227 apartment units proposed.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you... Yeah, sure.
Just a small concern about, my name is Helen Reel, live on top of the hill. This is my 5th or 50th anniversary around here. But anyway, what happens to the people who now live in the trailer park? Has there been any consideration made for them in terms of where would they go from here, considering the now quite expensive area in which we live? And we probably need many of their services.
The buyer has done quite a bit for them. If you want to expand upon that a little bit, Sean. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sean Gallagher from GMH. So we've been at this project for 3 years now. We purchased the mobile home park in July. There's a statute, Pennsylvania statute, that governs the decommissioning of mobile home parks, certain requirements, compensation. We did not own any of the trailers when we purchased the property. So the owners of the trailers get compensated one of two ways. They move their trailer, and we compensate them up to a certain amount for that. That's not really practical given the quality of the trailers in there. So the other option, which overwhelming majority are taking, is the acquisition of their trailer. We do an appraisal. If they agree to that number or we negotiate, we write them a check. We've offered them to stay longer than the Pennsylvania requires. We give them 6 months. That 6 months expired last March. Working with the township officials and some others from the school district, we offered that, we extended that to June, which puts a great deal of pressure on our company to start construction, but we did that. We're trying to work with the school district and work with the folks. So the park closes June 21st, and we hope by then that all of the remaining trailers are acquired and the people have moved on to better opportunities than what exists today in the North Rose Trailer Park. So, yes, we can only do so much, but I can tell you at GMH we've gone above and beyond what Pennsylvania requires, and I think you can ask anyone in this room or those outside, and I feel confident that they would agree with my statement.
Yeah. And just so you know, the state law that was referenced provides a minimum amount that is paid to an owner for their mobile home. So it can't be a very, very low number.
Any other comments on this project?
So,
Right.
So the only thing I would add, the only thing that changed in the resolution since what was provided to you for review in advance was condition F. So following up on this future right-of-way and Plainbrook Road extension, we have a condition that states that if the properties to the west were to redevelop in advance of that future road stub or bridge, whatever that form that takes, in advance of that the applicant would agree to essentially to consider granting a cross-access easement so that we can
so you
limit
could
the number
drive
of
through,
curb
right.
cuts and all of that. So the idea is really that this thought is preserved, that we're trying to plan ahead, but that they have the ability to kind of work with that property owner rather than us just saying, technically we can't obligate them to allow cross-access. So they've agreed to consider that down the road. So
Okay.
that's the only thing I wanted to
It's
clarify.
minor, I think.
Right.
All right.
Sue, I just wanted to address the comment of where the folks will go. The other thing I think that's worth noting is that the Old Orchard Mobile Home Park, also on Lancaster, is going to expand And that's something that the township has worked with them to allow that in the hopes that maybe some of these folks will move into that larger mobile home park.
Anything else? Anybody? All right, it's time for a motion then. Whose turn is this? Is it your turn? This is a preliminary final approval? I don't know, whoever.
I think it's right here. So I make a motion to approve the subdivision land development application for the 2018-29 LD for the GMH Fraser Lane Development, preliminary final land development with the amended condition F included.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Right. All right, next up is amended final subdivision and land development plan for Schertz Farm. Do we have somebody here for that, or is that going to be you, Zach?
Actually, the developer himself was going to be here tonight. His engineer had another meeting commitment, but the developer actually has the flu. So if there's any specific questions, I can kind of walk through this approval resolution, which you guys received. The only addition that we made, and this is something that was discussed and just not specifically included, it is presumed in a plan note on the revised plans that the homeowner association will maintain all of the trees. And so that's something, again, that was discussed last month, but wasn't specifically in the draft that you received. In terms of other specific, what I've been calling... Sure, yeah, I apologize.
In the meantime, I think it's important to point out that this is an amended final land development plan. This isn't a new plan, it's an amended plan. The final land development plan was approved on September 10th, 2014. The preliminary plan was, I think, approved in
2007.
2007. So this has been around for a while, which does affect legally some of the things that we're able to do now under our current codes.
Yeah, the only other, like I said, what I'll call extracurricular kinds of things that we try to capture in these approval resolutions is that basically the amendment was of the plan was really to go from a gravity sewer system to a low pressure system. And in addition to that change, they're actually stubbing their line out along 352 to allow future connection of the homes to the north. So there's about, I guess, 13 additional homes that could tie into that if and when they are ready, or if the township is ready to take on an extension project. So they've been gracious enough to do that. They've also tried to update their plans as much as possible to comply with current stormwater. Again, things that we normally wouldn't be able to require of them due to the plan being what I'll call grandfathered. But otherwise, they've made some enhancements and also bolstered their landscaping plan over what was previously proposed. So,
Okay. Yeah. Any questions on this? Any questions from the audience on this plan? Come on up.
Yeah, my name is Tom Hopkinson. I live at 98 Sproul Road. About the sewer thing, they put it in, I have to hook up to it, correct?
you don't have to hook up to it. No, what they've done is at least try to accommodate or not preclude future properties from tying into that system.
No, I asked
You're not
that same
obligated.
question. You're not going to be required to hook in. Right,
Okay.
Bill?
That's correct. Actually, they're only extending it in front of their own property, so it will not extend in front of any of the neighboring properties. So currently, there will not be a connection point for you.
All right, and when would that happen?
There's no timeline for that right now.
Okay. The other question is as far as I know, the Schertz's land comes right up to my barn. I mean, there's no space left. Same thing with the Immaculata property, butts up to the back of my barn. So there's no easements, there's no nothing. I mean, so these guys could put a house, you know what, right by my driveway.
Where's your house?
I'm
Where-
98 Sprawl. I'm over this little square in the barn here.
The other half in that, the line doesn't really match the way it is. The barn actually sits Farther to the south?
We can't see that picture.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe somebody show me what we're talking about
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, that's our house. This is our barn.
Right.
This actually sits farther south than this line shows. And on the picture that shows the trees, we actually have hedges that, according to the lie of the land, there's an old stone pillar that, according to the work we got when we bought the property in 2001, actually delineates a property line in the road.
Yeah, we've never seen any.
So you're disputing the property line.
We're just concerned about how this is drawn and if it's actually accurate to what we're gonna see.
And I've never had my property surveyed, so I have no idea, actually when we moved in, the Schertzes came over and said, this is our property, don't touch it, don't do anything. They came over and mowed some of this property once, never seen them again since. So I've been mowing the property, taking care of it and we have no problem with that. We like it that way, it's sort of a buffer. But, our concern is Immaculata says they own to the back of my barn. What's the easement that's there? These guys say they own to the side of my barn. What's the easement there? I mean, I have no idea what nobody has contacted me to say, this is
Yeah,
where our
we used to work
property
with
is.
Eric Reed, and last couple, we talked with him at length when the first preliminary things were being talked about in '04. And then we lost contact with him, and we hadn't heard any more about this until some of our neighbors were kind enough to say, hey, you might be wanting to watch this.
Well, apparently it was an approved plan way back then. Now, if there's a property line dispute, we don't have anybody representing the developer at the meeting.
And I think
Well,
the
no,
question
We
is,
just need to find
understand
out to
that.
make sure if that's actually drawn
Well,
to scale.
you
or
can
anything.
Well-
this is what they're planning to
Right,
do.
but who would we contact to find out, what the actual property lines are? And also, what's Immaculata doing about this? Their property butts up, how does that affect their property?
I don't know how it affects Immaculata. I've
Well,
not heard anything from
Have they been notified, do they know?
Well, it's an old plan. It was approved a long time ago. I imagine they were informed.
At
I
the
don't know.
time a land development plan is filed, adjoining properties get notified, correct?
Well, I never got noticed.
No?
Yeah, there's no MPC or local requirement for that.
But you were in touch with Eric at the time, back in 2014, when
And we
this
were
was
told that the
kind of going
initial
on?
buyer had changed, the initial developer backed out.
Rich, remember, this goes back to 2007
Yeah, this is way
approval,
back.
so,
7, not 14?
yeah, 7.
And then we were never notified of anything.
Yeah, so you folks didn't live there in 2007,
Oh,
did
yeah,
you?
we moved in
2001.
December 2001.
2001.
but what I'm hearing is your initial question is you're saying the easements, and I think what you're referring to more are the setbacks.
Okay.
Meaning, what is the mandatory buffer from
Yeah.
your?
From my property to
to
their
their
property
property.
line, and their property line to their whatever structures they're gonna put up.
And you can look on the plan here and zoom in, and you could see wherever your barn may be, north or south, I don't think it matters regarding the setback. You can see the setback lines are measured in there.
It's the dashed line, right?
Yeah, these dash lines represent the building envelope, which is basically all of all the relevant setbacks. Basically, they can't build outside of those setbacks. So what they show here is their approximate building footprint. I don't have a scale here, but I would imagine this is. Right, so I imagine the building itself is probably closer to 50, but,
I don't have a 20-foot setback from my property line?
well,
From your line for your barn?
Right.
No, it doesn't
my
appear like
barn.
you do.
Why not?
Well, because it was built in 1920.
I mean, if
I should be I should have the first thing, because I've been there long.
okay, we're not going to make you remove your barn and move it 20 feet from the line.
All right.
I guess and not necessarily with your time, but it'd be good to know who to talk to.
sure, I can put you in touch with the applicant and his engineer to just
Okay.
kind of make sure that you guys are on the same page.
Okay.
I believe some of the
The
tree.
other thing was, because it was a farm, did anybody do any testing on the soil, pesticides, lead, chromium, all that nasty stuff?
Again, that would have happened prior to 2007,
So there, if they did.
before the plan's
they
done.
did, but that would be in the record if they tested?
Well, I think it would be a question again for the engineer, for the applicant, because when the applicant purchased this property, again, prior to 2007, they, again, hopefully, before they're spending a lot of money purchasing a property, they're doing what's called their due diligence to make sure they're not
Right,
purchasing
yeah,
a
'cause-
property that has those issues.
Right, my understanding, it was an orchard long before, so. And now, you know, if they use pesticides, it was long before they have the stuff we have now. All right, thank you very much.
Do we have this name and address to get, so we can get in
I
touch?
have your address, and I already forgot your name. I apologize, sir. Let me write it down.
Tom Hopkinson, Hopkinson, 98 Sproul Road.
And as an aside too, that issue that you had regarding whether or not there are any environmental studies done, one of the requirements for this is that they're going to do a homeowners association. And the homeowners association law requires that when someone purchases a unit in an association, that they're provided with called a public offering statement, which the law requires that they show and put forward any found results of any environmental damages. So if you make friends with somebody who buys a unit here, you'll be able to get that information as well.
Tom, I can
from
give you
them.
my card if you like. If you want to just shoot me an email or give me a call, I can put you in touch with the developer. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I hadn't anticipated that. So we are ready for an amended final subdivision land development. This is the amended final plan.
Right. Yeah, I'll make, oh, sorry.
107 Sproul Road. That's correct. Kimmel. Not related to Jimmy Kimmel, thank God. Just have a question. Where is the road for that development going to come out onto 352?
It'll be slightly offset from Rogers. So if you're headed south, you know, away from Lancaster Avenue, down 352
Is it
towards
like-
East Goshen, Rogers Way will be on your left.
So it's by where the trailer is now, or how about you, Kathy? What number, house number are you? Yeah.
This would be, I assume then.
Well, if
north
that
of
guy was 98, one-
And they're on the other side
Mhm.
Yeah.
of theirs, going towards King.
It's right there. In other words, the View Road comes in, or it would be just to the right of it, or south of it.
Yeah,
So would that
it'll-
be by you?
Where is the water tower, the road that goes into the water towers there? That drive, it's that common drive that goes in between the properties 107 and 101? 105.
can you pull up Google Maps and maybe show people?
Because there have been numerous, I'm sure you're all aware of, accidents right where we are.
Yeah.
Deadly
And
accidents.
our concern is where the Schertz's farm is. I don't know if that's where the driveway's gonna come out, because there's a hump. And what it is a little gully. When they put in Rogers Way, it's kind of comes up. So when we come out of our driveway, it's a bear. I mean, there's been so many accidents. Just last year, some guy hit the pillar and knocked it over into our driveway. And the cop said speeding wasn't a factor. So, I mean, you know, and we've asked a couple times for them to put the speed thing up. And our concern is there's gonna be more traffic and they're gonna be.
But it's also, I guess, is there going to be a traffic light eventually put up there if there's a road that's directly across from our drive that we go in, or?
Maybe, Chris, you want to talk a little
This
bit
is
about
where-
traffic?
Yeah,
Ask the chief about traffic.
that's a state road.
Yes,
Right.
yep.
That's a state road. They don't, as part of this project, they don't currently meet warrants for a traffic light. It's a relatively low number of trips, but I mean, I think the bigger issue is trying to figure out a solution for 352 itself, not so much how this property can fix that is more that, I don't think that it's truly going to exacerbate it. I understand pulling out and road alignment, those are all things that kind of factor into the safety of that road, but there will not be, just to reiterate, there will not be a traffic light as a result of this project.
So would it be coming out right by the driveway of where Schertz's are?
It's, I believe so their current driveway, I think, is more or less right across from Rogers Way, correct?
Theirs is, yeah.
Yeah, if you're facing their home, it'll be to the left of that. They'll maintain that driveway, but also have access to this shared road, I believe.
Be down towards us.
So they may or may not use their driveway quite as often, but
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty, especially the people coming up the hill really come fast.
Yeah.
But the people that are coming down our way, it's when they are in that gully, it's pretty bad.
they do meet the required site distance.
They're too fast. It's supposed to be 35 and nobody does 30.
We can address any speeding issues you have at the time.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not going to make changes here. I think, how many houses are there, 7 or 10?
It'll be a total of 14 lots.
Yeah.
What size are these lots? Do we know that?
Yeah, they're not quite an acre.
Okay. Do we know the price of these homes yet?
I do not have that
No,
number.
we don't get that information.
Okay. Looking for the value of mine to go up. I'm looking to move.
So then we won't be able to, if we wanted to hook up on us with sewer on the other side of where Schertz's farm is?
That's a Bill question.
Are you talking going towards King Road?
Across the street from Schertz's farm. Like, that's where we live, across the street, by where the water towers are.
Brenda Victoria.
When we did the sewer project there, from Summit, I think down to about 125 maybe, I think those homes are all connected to public sewer or had that opportunity to connect at that time. I don't know what house you're talking about.
Yeah, we're on 105, so we're
Oh,
like
you're-
where Rogers Way is,
Down the hill.
yeah, and going down.
Yeah.
So you're saying no? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank
Pretty
you.
much it. Thank you. The other thing is traffic.
Any other comments? Come on up. Have we been given a date?
We've not been given a date. I think they are working on amending their NPDS permit. Yeah, I don't have a specific timeline now.
No, not instantly.
It wouldn't be anytime soon. They still have to go through to shore up anything to make sure that they're able to record their final plan, which includes entering into a land development agreement with the township to make sure that that construction's done right. So there are still some requirements they have to do before they break ground. So it's not going to happen tomorrow.
They already have the highway occupancy permit, though, as
Yeah,
far as we know.
and I apologize. I usually am a little more up to speed on the status of permits. These were mostly obtained previously. I think the HOP was previously approved. The NPDS was previously approved. And I think there's a number of outside agency permits that they need. And I just am drawing a blank on which one they had to re-up on. I apologize.
Can the township request a stop sign, a three-way stopping? That would slow traffic.
I don't think so. It's a state road, right, Chris?
I was just thinking, I know, but I was just thinking it's a way to slow people down. I mean, they put all those stop signs on Warren Avenue. Go a block and you gotta stop, you going up and out, you gotta stop.
It's Malvern.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, stop signs aren't intended to control speed, but I agree. 352 is not it's not a problem. So, yeah.
I can't hear. Would you please come up? Nothing of this gets on the tape unless you come up. I'm sorry.
I'd just like to know who the builder is.
The entity is Woodstone Homes, and the point of contact is John Backish.
Okay.
I think I'm pronouncing that properly.
Okay, thank you.
Just a question about, like, if the developer, you're saying they have to get permits from outside entities. I don't know the situation that you're in, but if a stoplight is a possibility of slowing traffic, but that's a state road, is it possible to have that developer apply from the state? I mean, do they have any responsibility? Please tell me developers have responsibility in this township. Do they have responsibility? I mean, is that a place that they can go?
This specific application does not meet warrants, what they call warrants. In other words, it doesn't generate enough traffic to justify or require a stoplight. A larger development
According to the residents that live there, they're saying it does.
Right, but there's a lot of different developments that dump into that road. That's an existing traffic issue. I mean,
But it's a state road. It's their responsibility to make sure that road is safe for our township.
Right.
So I guess my question is, if someone else wants to develop, do they have a response? Is it possible to ask for that, especially if the residents of that specific place is saying that it's dangerous?
We can always ask. We can ask just about anything, but no, PennDOT reviews that and generally wouldn't.
This is a state road. So the state trumps the township, unfortunately. So we can't tell PennDOT, even if we wanted a stoplight, we can't tell PennDOT to put it in there. If PennDOT wants a stoplight, PennDOT's going to make the developer put in that stoplight.
So how do the residents keep PennDOT to let them know that we need a...
I think go to your local legislator.
Somebody gets killed, you get a light. Yep. No, not necessarily.
I just have a really, I keep hearing dates like 2004 and 2007. Do you mean to tell me that I can put in a proposal and sit on it for 20 or 30 years and then build? Certainly our zoning, our requirements, everything has changed in that. We know a lot more about stuff like steep slopes and what's causing, and we have like way too much traffic and building in this township. How can we, I mean, shouldn't there be a time limit on how long a proposal is good for before you start to build?
There absolutely is, and this is sort of a unique situation. The Pennsylvania Commonwealth passed a law called the Permit Extension Act. I think it happened in 2008. As you may recall, the market crashed around there, and then there was a bunch of projects that were left open, and in order for the Commonwealth to assist all of the developers out there, they said, hey, any permits, any approvals you received, we're going to freeze them. And I think they were freezed up till July of 2015. So during that period of time, the clocks that are normally in, that you're speaking about, were frozen by state law. So they were able to sort of take advantage of that permit extension period in order to have this plan stay active.
Even if it wasn't a state permit.
Even if it wasn't a state, the law said that the townships, it was zoning permits, development permits, townships have to freeze those rights. So it isn't something, unless hopefully the market doesn't crash again, but hopefully it's something that won't repeat itself moving forward.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. I think we're ready.
Okay. I'll make a motion then to approve the amended final subdivision land development plan for Schertz Farm, number 2018-27.
Do I have a second?
Second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I hope the next one's a little easier. This is Exeter. Do we have somebody here for Exeter? Allison again.
Good evening, Allison Zarro on behalf of Exeter. This project, I'm pinch hitting tonight for Ms. Yarnoff, so forgive me if I don't have a lot of information, but I know that the board did receive a presentation on this last month. This is relates to two existing buildings that are currently vacant in the Great Valley Corporate Center. The developer's proposing some parking lot improvements and some truck turning improvements to access existing loading docks behind one of the buildings. So this was not a full redevelopment of the site just some minor changes.
Yeah, I would say the only extracurriculars are related to dedication of right-of-way and some easements for future trails. The applicant has agreed to offer them at no cost to the township. Some to capture existing roadway improvements, some for future trail enhancements that the township has studied in the past. So they've been really flexible in that regard. So there's a number of comments related to those items, but I would say they're generally pretty straightforward. Happy to answer any questions you may have, but
Any questions from anyone in the audience on this? Personally, I'm really pleased to see some improvements and some new tenants over there in the Great Valley Corporate Center. It needed a little sprucing up, and I kind of like this one. It's looking minor changes, but they gutted the whole building, so this is good.
Do you know, did Exeter buy the entire all the parcels on the, looks like the eastern side of Great Valley Parkway from Liberty, or just these couple?
Just these couple, to the best of my
Okay.
knowledge, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Any questions from the audience about this particular plan? All right. Let's make a motion then.
So I make a motion to approve the land development, preliminary final land development for Exeter at 925 Great Valley Parkway, number 2018-30-DP.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. Okay. Chris, this is the draft amendments for subdivision and land development ordinance.
Good evening. So I'm here really just to introduce some proposed ordinance revisions. There's no action being taken this evening. It's just to walk the board through some of the highlights of the ordinance revisions. Essentially what's happening associated with these ordinance revisions, it's some changes were made within the township as part of the comprehensive plan process, reclassifying some of the roads in the township. And as a result of that process, and I think one of the recommendations coming out of the comprehensive plan process was to do a few things. One was to develop an official map, and the other was to take a look at the ordinances in the township. What we found is that the current ordinances in the township with regard to road design standards are lacking. Most municipal ordinances are. And also, the current ordinances really don't speak at all with regard to bike and pedestrian facilities. So there's a lot of additions and revisions, but what it all does is it's an effort to bring the township's current ordinances into current practice and current standards with regard to roadway design standards, as well as provide for the first time comprehensive bike and pedestrian accommodations and requirements. And all of the roadway design recommendations you're going to see this evening all tie back to the comprehensive plan and the various roadway classifications that were identified in the comprehensive plan. So again, the comprehensive plan really served as the basis for these revisions, which I'll describe. So with that, and again, I'm not going to read every language change in the ordinance. I just want to hit the highlights. So next slide. So the ordinance speaks today about single access streets or cul-de-sac streets. So this is a new provision that we're recommending, which simply says that a single access street shall not be approved when a through street is feasible. The logic is we have a history of land development, especially in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. A lot of developments were built with a lot of cul-de-sac streets and not a lot of thought being paid to connecting communities together. That trend has clearly changed. There's greater interest in connecting communities together. It's great for social interaction, and it's also more effective for just transportation purposes, for vehicular connections, for pedestrian connections, for emergency access. And if we can connect our roads together and create really an interconnected roadway system, we're also allowing for more efficient travel, which will help address issues of congestion, rather than every development having its own isolated driveway out onto a major road. So this is a new, simple provision which would give the board some authority or some influence to encourage interconnected communities. It doesn't mean you can't allow cul-de-sacs, you still can where they make sense, but this provision would give the board more power to encourage interconnected communities.
Chris, I have one question.
Yes.
Your thoughts about existing communities where there is only one way in and one way out?
This wouldn't change existing communities, so they can continue to remain as is. This would really just apply to new projects going forward.
Is there any recommendation on existing developments that you'd recommend?
Well, where feasible, if there's an opportunity, if a development were to come in on an adjacent piece of property, and if there was an opportunity to connect communities together, I would recommend it, but it's not a requirement.
Do you want comments as you go, or do you want them at the end? We- Let's wait until I asked him a question. Does he want questions now, or do you want him at the end?
Well, I'll leave it to the board. I would love to go through the presentation and take questions at the end, but I'll leave it
Let's
up.
go that way, because
Okay.
we could be here for,
Yeah, the only thing I would offer is existing communities, if there's an existing cul-de-sac community with homes located along that cul-de-sac, there would be no feasible opportunity to connect into that community. Or if the community cul-de-sac were surrounded by private property or public or HOA open space, again, that really wouldn't be very conducive to connecting communities together. The thought is when a community is developed and if a cul-de-sac bulb ends right at a property line, and it did so because it was the intended purpose to continue that road at some point in the future, this would allow for that. But in most cases, most of your existing cul-de-sacs, if they were designed and built to be permanently closed communities, it's rare that you would find an easy opportunity to connect into those communities.
So Chris, to highlight that, everything you're about to talk about is going to only apply to any new developments.
Correct.
And not something that's currently existing.
Correct.
So we're not requiring anyone to make any changes to their property.
This would
or
not
their
require any
communities.
existing property owners to make a change to their property.
So
it's on tape.
This would be like those plans that we saw that were approved when developers come in and they want to build a community.
Yes.
We will require them to do this.
We may require. We have
may
the ability
require-
to require that.
If the township feels that it's in their best interest to have these guidelines followed.
Correct.
And in that regard, all these items in the subdivision and land development ordinance, if an adjoining neighborhood would not want to be connected, and they made a good reason for it, we have the power to waive this requirement.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
Absolutely. Next slide. So with regard to single access street length or cul-de-sac street length, currently there's a requirement that says cul-de-sacs have to be at least 500 feet long. We really don't see any reason why there would be a minimum cul-de-sac, so we're recommending removing that section. We are recommending a new provision whereby a separate emergency access would be required for a cul-de-sac longer than 1,000 feet. We don't want to have unnecessarily long cul-de-sacs and only have one way in or out. So when a cul-de-sac is significantly, is 1,000 feet or longer, it would require an emergency access. There is language in there that would also encourage emergency access for any cul-de-sac when deemed necessary. That's just a safety requirement or safety recommendation. Next slide. So this is really intended for new developments. So single access street extensions, when a new development is built, and if it is built with a cul-de-sac street, maybe a temporary cul-de-sac street that terminates at a property line, and it was done so with the clear intent of extending that road at some point in the future, and I've been involved in this situation in other communities where a new development was built, the cul-de-sac terminated at a property line. There were no homes on the back end of the cul-de-sac bulb because the intent was the neighboring property was one day going to develop with the exact same type of land use, and the township wanted to connect the roads through. So you have a situation where it's all brand new development. So the first homeowner in, long story short, the requirement would be for the developer to post signage at the end of the cul-de-sac making it very clear that this road will be extended, so that the buyer beware, so that the homeowner that buys a property on that street knows that that road is going to be extended at some point in the future, rather than have it being buried in HOA documents that perhaps nobody is reading. So it's really just putting the information out there. Next. Single access street drainage. Right now, the drainage requirements for single access street in the current ordinance aren't specifically referenced, so we just added a reference to the township stormwater requirements for single access streets, as well as for all streets. Next slide. Single access street geometry. Again, we're just cleaning up some missing information from the current ordinance, simply indicating that single access streets must be designed to public street standards.
Does
Pretty
this
obvious.
apply to private streets as well?
It would apply to private streets as well, yes. So there is a requirement in the ordinance revisions that would suggest that public streets and private streets, whether they're public or private, all would have to be built to township standards.
Yeah, currently our ordinance just says all public streets, but we're adding the private built to these same standards.
Correct.
To clarify.
The next one, so this is a new provision which allows for the curbing of a temporary cul-de-sac turnaround if the township engineer deems curbing is necessary. So in the case of a cul-de-sac road that was intended to be temporary, it requires curbing if deemed necessary by the township engineer. The current ordinance allows for curbing to be built on a temporary cul-de-sac if deemed necessary by the applicant. So we're shifting that responsibility to make the determination to the township. Next slide. Traffic sign placement. So right now, there is no clear specific guidance on where signs should be located. There's a reference that we use in our industry called the Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices. So we're simply referencing specific standards in the MUTCD manual that would dictate where signs should be placed. So street name signs, that sort of thing. So that they're placed logically and so that they can be visible to motorists. Street dedication, simply adding a provision that would say the Board of Supervisors are not required to accept dedication of a street. So it gives the board the authority or the ability, as I think you have anyway, but this makes it very clear that the board has the authority to accept or not accept dedication if you so choose.
Does that choice have to be made closer to the beginning of the review of the plan, or can be made any time?
It doesn't specify.
Right.
Next one, private streets. So this is what we just talked about. So private streets shall be designed and constructed to public street standards. And so a couple of months ago, I was in front of the Planning Commission. We walked through these same language changes, and the Planning Commission recommended that we not only identify design requirements, but construction requirements as well. So we're now clearly stating that private streets should be designed and built according to public street standards. Next slide. So this is a functional classification map, and this is based on the comprehensive plan map. And what it does is it identifies key roadways throughout the township, and it designates those roads based on their function, therefore called a functional classification map. So it identifies roads as major arterial streets, minor arterial streets, major and minor collector streets, distributor roads, and then local streets. So this is based on the comprehensive plan, and then this map is referenced in the new ordinance. When determining street design requirements, we would have to look back to the functional classification of the road. So a local street wouldn't have the same design requirements as would an arterial street. Pretty obvious, pretty normal course of practice. It's now specifically called out in the ordinance. Next slide. So what I'm going to talk about over the next few slides are really the biggest changes that we have in the ordinance. So if you can hit the button twice, Zach. So currently, the current classifications are shown with the big red X. So we're doing away with the current road classifications. We now have new roadway classifications, and these are based on the comprehensive plan, as I just mentioned. So we have current road right-of-way requirements, which we're doing away with. So if you want to there we go. So just before you go to the next one, okay, sorry. So right now the ordinance as written references PennDOT requirements for right-of-way for major and minor arterials. PennDOT doesn't have requirements for right-of-way. So we're doing away with the existing right-of-way requirements, and then we're developing new requirements, so go ahead. And so this is based on the functional classification map. So we have a right-of-way requirement as much as 120 feet for major arterial roads, and then it goes down as low as 50 feet for local streets, and then everything in between. And these right-of-way requirements are pretty standard when you look at other guidance that's available. And obviously, the higher the function, the wider the right-of-way, because higher order roads have more lanes, more likely to have sidewalks or bike lanes or whatever it may be, so it requires more room to work within. Local streets are narrower and have less right-of-way requirement. Oh, and so currently, if you hit the button again, so currently there is a requirement in the ordinance that has a right-of-way established for private driveways. Not really sure why we need a right-of-way for a private driveway, so we're removing that requirement. Next slide. So these are the current cartway and shoulder width requirements that are based on the current functional classifications. So go ahead, Zach, hit the button. This is all going away. So go to the next one. So now these are the new recommended street width requirements. And again, if you look on the left-hand side, these road classifications are based on the comprehensive plan and the functional classification map. One big change, and what we've done, so we're doing something a little bit differently. Today, the ordinance requires local streets, minor streets, actually how they're referenced, to be 32 feet wide, independent of anything else. What kind of development, how many lanes, is there parking, is there shoulder, is there, it just says 32 feet. It's a one-size-fits-all approach. And what we've found is that 32 feet isn't always appropriate. Sometimes it's too wide, maybe it's not wide enough. We know the township has dealt with issues of speeding on local roads, and if we're building all of our roads 32 feet wide, when perhaps they don't need to be 32 feet wide, they're too wide, we're going to encourage speeding. So we're trying to customize the width of the road based on the needs of the road. So it's a much more tailored approach. So we've broken the width of the road down into components. So we're looking at the travel lanes as one component, and then we're looking at the need for parking or shoulder or bike lanes as a separate component. So this table just focuses on the travel lanes. So all street types, if it's a curbed lane, it's a 14-foot wide lane. If it's a curbed lane with parking, it's 11 feet. And the reason it drops in width is because you would have the added width associated with the on-street parking. And then if there's no curb, it's 11 feet as well. For local roads, and then we have residential subdivision streets as sort of a subset of local roads. So for example, the Schertz Farm property, right, a small cul-de-sac development with how many homes, 15 homes or so, you know, that doesn't need to be a 32-foot wide road. When we presented this to the Planning Commission, we identified for the curbed with parking and no curb options, we identified a range of lane widths, that it could be anywhere from 9 feet to 11 feet. Well, the Planning Commission said that leaves too much up in question, and you know, what's to prevent a developer always coming in for the most narrow lane width? Can you develop some objective criteria? And they suggested based on the average daily traffic that would use the road, which was a great suggestion. So this is new. So for local streets, it's a 14-foot curb lane, it's an 11-foot curb lane with parking, and a 10-foot lane when no curb. But then for residential subdivision streets, we broke the lane width requirements down based on the ADT of the road. So if it has an ADT of 1,000 to 2,000, that's the highest level. Then it's 400 to 1,000, and then an ADT of less than 400, which is a very low volume road over the course of a day. And you can see we've now identified lane widths that are tailored and customized to the amount of traffic that would use the road. We also have a requirement in the ordinance that suggests that curbing would be required on all new streets unless determined unnecessary in the opinion of the township engineer. There may be reasons why we may not want curbing on a road, if it's better for drainage to not have curbing, or if, depending on the setting of where it's located, curbing would be inconsistent with the surrounding land uses and the other roads. But the way it's written is curbing is required, so that's sort of the negotiating point. But if curbing is determined unnecessary, we can back off that requirement. And if curbing is unnecessary, we've now got lane width requirements that respond to that, with curb and without curb. So I'm going to try to piece all this together at the end, so I'll go to the next slide. So this is lane width. So now we have, for the same street types, we have a shoulder width requirement and on-street parking. So shoulders would only be required on roads or lanes that are not curbed. So when you have a curbed road, you wouldn't have a shoulder. Shoulders are typically required when it is an uncurbed road. So you have an 8-foot shoulder for an arterial, and it goes all the way down to a 2-foot shoulder for a local road, or a residential subdivision street would be a 2-foot shoulder. On-street parking, it's generally an 8-foot width wide lane is appropriate for on-street parking. There is language in here that would suggest that it could be a 7-foot wide on-street parking lane if you had parking on both sides of the road. 7 to 8 feet is pretty typical in our business as a suitable parking lane width. The reason we dropped the lane width down from 8 to 7 when you have parking on both sides is when you have a residential community, if you allow parking on both sides of the road, you're now going to have more of an interspersed situation of parking kind of back and forth on both roads. You're not going to have a dense concentration of parking all on one side, so you can shrink it from 8 to 7 if necessary. So go to the next slide. So here's what I want to talk about a little bit. So example 1, 2-lane residential street, no parking. Under the current ordinance, that would be classified as a minor road, and it's a 32-foot wide road. Today, it's a one-size-fits-all approach. So it would be 2 16-foot lanes, 32-foot wide road. No matter if it's 2 homes on that road or 500 homes on the road, it's always going to be a 32-foot wide road. So under the new recommended ordinance, if it's a subdivision street with curb and no parking, well, now it would be 13-foot travel lanes. It's a 26-foot wide road. Now, there's no parking on this road, a 26-foot wide curbed road. So now you're building a road that's more appropriate for the conditions. It's not going to encourage speeding. 26-foot wide road with curb is absolutely appropriate in this situation. And it's not creating unnecessary paving. It's not creating unnecessary stormwater management. And we've developed a road that's appropriate to the development. So next one. So in this example, it's a 2-lane residential street with parking on one side. So again, under the current ordinance, it's a 32-foot wide road, right? It's a one-size-fits-all approach today, so 2 16-foot lanes, 32-foot wide road. So under the new recommended ordinance, when it's with a curbed road with parking on one side, depending on the ADT of the road, right? If it's a 400 or less ADT, it could be a 9-foot lane. If it's a 400, or if it's a 1,000 to 2,000 foot ADT, it could be 11-foot lane. So your lanes would be anywhere from 9 feet to 11 feet. And when you have parking on one side of the road, it's an 8-foot lane. So your width of that residential development street would be anywhere from 26 feet to 30 feet. Now, the only difference I'll make here is that on this exhibit, the parking lane is striped out. But in a residential subdivision, we wouldn't stripe the parking. That would just be an extra pavement that would be available for parking. It would be signed, parking's available on this side of the street, no parking on the other side of the street, and you would have a residential community that would have a 26 to 30-foot wide road. Gives a little bit more lateral kind of flexibility and comfort, and it would support parking on one side of the road. Next slide. So that really is the biggest change throughout this ordinance, and it tries to be very tailored and specific to the needs of the development, the needs of the community, and the needs of traffic. So, go ahead, Zach, hit the slide a couple of times. So these are horizontal sight distance requirements. Right now, the requirements in the current ordinance are based on the old functional classifications. We're obviously basing it on now the new, maybe hit the button again, I don't know if it does any, no, okay, go back. So we're now tying in the horizontal curve, or horizontal sight distance requirements are now tied into the recommended roadway classifications, and the proposed requirement for sight distance would be to base it on AASHTO requirements. So AASHTO is the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials. It's a very big document, and it provides all the necessary detail for how to design safe and effective roads. And it's a big document, and it's because I think it's because there's so much that goes into roadway design is why most ordinances really don't address roadway design thoroughly and properly, because it's too much to do. So what we're doing is we're really just referencing the township's road design requirements, tying it back to AASHTO criteria, but we are suggesting that we have a minimum, we would never go less than 200 feet of sight distance under any condition, and the reason is 200 feet is about the sight distance on a horizontal curve. This is not intersection sight distance, this is along a roadway. 200 feet is about the sight distance that you would require for a 25-mile-an-hour road, which is generally your lowest speed road. Next slide. So horizontal curve radius, you can hit it a couple times. So same thing, we're doing away with the old requirements which tie back to the old functional classifications. In this case, the minimum curve requirements tie back to AASHTO requirements, so it makes it very simple for the township. But again, we're not going less than 150 feet of horizontal curve, of a horizontal curve radius. Again, it ties back to 25 miles an hour, and it's actually in line with the current township ordinances for 150 feet, and very typical what you would see in residential subdivisions. It's a good dimension. Next one. So vertical curve sight distance requirements. Currently, caught up here. So currently the vertical curve, so this is the sight distance over a crest curve that you would see within a community. Currently the vertical curve sight distance requirements would say you can't go anything less than the sight distance that's required for 35 miles an hour. We're recommending that we lower that to 25 miles an hour. There's no reason to over-design a road. If it's a residential road and we know traffic is traveling at 25 miles per hour, so we're suggesting that 25 miles per hour would be the lowest level we would go for vertical curve sight distance, but we are also tying it back to AASHTO design criteria as well. Next one. You can hit it a couple of times there, Zach. So again, street grade, so this is the percentage grade that you would have uphill or downhill on any of the roads. So again, we're tying it back to the new functional classifications, and then the proposed grades that we're suggesting are based on really AASHTO and PennDOT criteria. These are widely accepted in our business, are safe and effective, and have been used to design roads throughout the region. The only real change we didn't make was for single access streets. For whatever reason, the township current ordinance limits the grade on single access streets to be 8%. We decided to keep that 8%. And maybe there's a reason when it only has one access, maybe for emergency response or fire response, that we didn't want to have too steep a grade. So we just kept the 8% that is in the current ordinance for single access streets. Next one. Roadway drainage. So we've added new language that would require PennDOT drainage standards for township roads. Right now, as it relates to roadway, there is very comprehensive stormwater management language in the ordinance, but it doesn't speak in detail about roadway drainage. And so we're referencing PennDOT roadway drainage requirements to be used for roads. And again, developers are following these requirements as it is today anyway, especially if they have an access that ties into a state road. So we're following these same good best practices. Next one. So clear sight triangles. So this is different than sight distance. Clear sight triangles is just when you design a new intersection, you just need an area at the intersection which is free and clear of any obstructions. And the way the ordinance is currently written, it requires a 100-foot triangle, which frankly is difficult to meet, and it gets violated, in my opinion, all the time. It's not, I don't think it's very realistic, especially as developments are getting denser and denser. So we're suggesting that we reduce it to 75 feet. 75 feet is still appropriate. It's safe. It provides a wide open area at the intersection. And we're also recommending relocating the sight triangle reference to the sight distance section of the ordinance so that they're all in one place. Next one. So corner radius, right now the current requirement is a 20-foot radius where two intersections meet, where you would have the curb radius. It's a 20-foot radius for minor roads, and all other road intersections are 30 feet. So we're just upping each by 10 feet. 30 feet for residential, local, and distributor roads, and then 40 feet for all other intersections. It's typically what you will find. But we are also adding language in the ordinance that says, well, these are our requirements, but at the end of the day, you also have to do truck turning template analysis, and we need to make sure that it's safe and effective for truck access, emergency access, fire truck circulation. So it gives us the ability to require something different if something different is safer. Next.
I would just add that those are also reviewed by our Codes and Life Safety Department for just general fire code and maneuverability and things like that. So we require it in a number of ways.
So intersection sight distance, this is the one issue that I think we most often get involved with, and that's when a new driveway or a new intersection is built. We have to make sure that there is proper sight distance. So the conversation we had earlier about Schertz Farm and where that driveway is located. So when we pull up to the edge and you're a motorist and you're looking left and looking right along Sproul Road, there's got to be a minimum required sight distance for it to be safe. So right now, PennDOT has two different sets of criteria. They have what they call their desirable criteria, and then they also have their safe stopping sight distance criteria, which is it's less than desirable, but it's still safe and it meets all roadway design standards. Currently, the ordinance only references PennDOT's desirable criteria, so we're recommending we change the requirements in the ordinance to just simply reference PennDOT's sight distance standards based on Pennsylvania Code, Title 67, Chapter 441, which would recognize both desirable sight distance and safe stopping sight distance. We're also recommending a new provision that if we have a disagreement with the developer, if we just can't, we're not convinced that sight distance is adequate, we can require the preparation of a sight distance plan to verify the adequacy of sight distance if necessary. Next. Road paving standards, so this is new and it just simply references PennDOT construction standards per PennDOT publication 408. Next, which is PennDOT's construction practices. Driveway standards, and this really relates to residential driveways. So the current requirement for driveway width, there's two references in the ordinance today, one's for 10 feet, one's for 20 feet. We're recommending just go with 10 feet, but we do have language in there that says it could be wider if needed based on anticipated traffic. So that gives us an opportunity to look at it and have a conversation with a developer if necessary. Site distance is based on PennDOT standards. Pavement radius, so this is where the driveway, the radius of the driveway would tie into the intersecting road. Right now, there's nothing specified. We're recommending 5 feet for residential driveways, and we would reference the intersection radius requirements for all other intersections. Minimum length, today it's not specified as a length for a driveway, and I think really the motivation for this came when we look at the Linden Hall development, and those driveways were built, they're very shallow, they're not very deep for accommodating traffic, so this would require a minimum of 20 feet for a driveway from the front edge of the garage to the right-of-way line or to the sidewalk, whatever the limiting factor is. So it would ensure that we can park a vehicle in that driveway and not have it hang over the sidewalk or hang into the road. Next. So the current, now I'm going to switch from road design standards to bike and ped standards. So if you hit the button again, currently we have no bike and ped standards. So this is all new. This is an area where the ordinances have been currently lacking. So go to the next one. So the bike and ped standards, this is all new. There's a lot of information. What I'll do is I'm just going to walk you through the changes. So general requirements, we have a requirement that says sidewalks are required on both sides of all streets, public and private. That's where we start. Now, if we decide to waive sidewalks in certain situations, you have that ability to do so, but we start from the basis of requiring sidewalks. Verge area is required. That's a buffer area between the sidewalk and the edge of the road. That's required for all sidewalk installations. And we have a requirement that says land developments are required to upgrade existing bike and pedestrian facilities located adjacent to the site to current standards. So if a development comes in, if there's a sidewalk in front of the property today and it doesn't meet current standards, this would require the developer, as part of their site improvements, to also improve the sidewalk to current standards. Next. So sidewalks, they're required on all streets. Minimum width requirement is 5 feet wide, which is ADA compliant. The minimum verge area or the buffer would be 4 feet wide, and the ordinance does require construction requirements for sidewalk as well. Next, paths.
Yeah, all sidewalks are gonna, you have the concrete sidewalk, and then you have a grass strip?
Yes. So you have a
And
grass
then-
buffer, at least that's where we start from, a
Right,
grass
okay,
buffer between the sidewalk and the curb. Now, are there instances where we would have to waive the verge requirement because it just isn't practical?
Right.
Absolutely. A good example of that is Ivy Prep. The developer has agreed to build improvements along Route 30 that are consistent with the Route 30 corridor master plan, including building sidewalk along their frontage. But because of the topography of the property and the way the site lays out and the development lays out, and in fact, there's an existing drainage facility that runs across the corner of the property, there's an area where the site, they're giving us a 4-foot buffer over half the property, but it just wasn't practical and along the entire length of the property, so where it doesn't make sense, it's just not practical, they've routed the sidewalk to be up against the curb edge of the road, and that's okay. Paths, so a couple of things. So we have, in the ordinance, it talks about extending paths. So if a developer were to build on a piece of property, and if there is a public path on its neighboring property right next to it, the language would require this new developer to continue that path across their property. And then Zach and I have talked, we're talking about maybe adding some language that also would reference the official map. It wouldn't be any path, but it's a path that's been identified by the township as one of significance. And I guess the indicator that it's significant is that it's also located on the official map. But it would require a new developer on a vacant piece of property to continue a path if the neighboring property has that path, and it's a path that we've identified as it's a public facility that we want to continue. Paths are a minimum of 6 feet wide, also have a 4-foot wide verge area if located next to a road. They would be located within a 20-foot wide public access easement, and the ordinance has construction requirements as well. Next one. Yeah. Yes. Well, it is paved, but it also talks about just, you know, the base course and all the different aspects of paving and grading of that path.
Yeah, that's an important point too. I think to Chris's point about the verge, that's the starting point. If there's an instance where it's not appropriate or it'd be preferable, let's say it runs through the woods, you know, maybe a naturalized path is more appropriate. Generally speaking, you start with the more restrictive and you adjust from there if need be.
So from here on out, it's pretty, well, multi-use trail, this is pretty consistent with the path discussion. So again, it requires continuation of paths or trails on neighboring property. In this case, multi-use trails are a minimum of 8 feet wide and could go up to 12 feet wide depending on the, and again, this also ties back to the official map. We have trails identified on the official map that would have varying widths depending on the intended use of the trail. There is a minimum 2-foot wide shoulder area, which doesn't have to be paved. It can just be a grass area next to a clear area next to the trail. A minimum 5-foot wide verge area if it's located next to a road, also located within a 20-foot wide easement, and there are construction requirements there as well. Next one. So bicycle lane, so this is new. A bicycle lane is 5 feet wide and 6 feet wide if it's located next to on-street parking. And that's in each direction. So if you had a road and a bike lane on both sides of the road, you would have 5 feet on both sides of the road. Must provide a bicycle lane symbol and arrow, must provide bike lane signage, and there are specific installation requirements. Crosswalks, minimum of 6 feet wide, delineated with 2 6-inch white lines. Continental crosswalks may be required at high pedestrian locations, and in both pictures, those are examples of continental crosswalks. Typically, they're used in high traffic roads or in high pedestrian areas where we just want greater visibility. But they're not, it would be overkill to provide those in all situations. There's a requirement for ADA compliance, and if located at a traffic signal, there are requirements to provide countdown timers, pedestrian push buttons, that sort of thing for pedestrian and ADA accessibility. Next. Yep.
Is there any sight distance on crosswalks? And I'm thinking particularly of some of the places where the trail crosses a road and it just comes out very suddenly.
So the ordinance as written doesn't reference, and that's a great question, does not reference sight distance requirements for trail intersections. And the reason is in most cases, where you have crosswalks or where you have trails and paths crossing a road, 9 times out of 10, I'll say, they're located at an intersection, and the sight distance and the visibility issue has already been addressed as part of the creation of the intersection. But if it's a mid-block trail crossing or a mid-block path crossing, that would be a situation where we should look at sight distance, and we should hold that trail crossing to the same sight distance requirements as we would for any intersection. And that is not addressed in the current ordinance, and that's probably something worth mentioning.
Let's make a note of that.
Yeah, I like
Okay.
that. Thank you. Crosswalks were good. Shared lane. So a shared lane is usually on lower order streets. It's maybe residential streets, or a shared lane is really just what you see in that picture. It's a pavement legend of a bicyclist and a chevron. And what it does is it tells the motorist that this road it's a shared lane. It's just as lawful for a vehicle to be in that lane as it is for a bicyclist to be in that lane. So it's not applicable in all cases, but where it is applicable, it would be only even considered on roads that are 35 miles an hour or less, must have the appropriate signage and striping, and there are specific installation requirements. You'll see this on corridors that have been identified for bike circulation, but there just isn't either the room or the need to have a separate facility. And again, it's usually on lower volume, lower speed situations. Striped shoulder with buffer, so the picture in the lower right corner shows it pretty well. So you would typically use a striped shoulder with a buffer and again, it would be available for bike and pedestrian access. Typically, our preferred approach would be to have sidewalks or off-road trails, that sort of thing, but sometimes there are situations where it's just not feasible to provide an off-road facility. So there is such a thing. It's known as a striped shoulder with buffer, be a minimum of 5 feet wide, but it would have a 2-foot buffer between the 5-foot path and the travel lane to provide extra comfort for the pedestrian or for the bicyclist. There is an option for supplemental signage, and there are specific installation requirements as well.
I'll just add, this is good for like retrofits on existing roads where there may not be space for other types of facilities.
Correct. And really that's it. So this is the official map. So what I'll say before I talk about the official map, and this is my last slide. So if this gets approved in some fashion, I think East Whiteland will quickly go from being in the Stone Ages when it comes to bike and pedestrian facilities to maybe leading the way. There is not an ordinance in Chester County that I'm aware of that would be this comprehensive as to requirements for bike and pedestrian facilities. So I think this would be really a great advancement for the township. And it recognizes, I think, a lot of the feedback that we got during the comprehensive planning process. There's a lot of interest in bike and pedestrian facilities, interest in trails and paths. So the ordinance would now recognize that as well, and it would give us requirements. So the official map was a recommendation that came out of the comprehensive plan, and this is a map that basically shows our vision for infrastructure improvements. You can't read it here very easily, but there's a legend on the right-hand side, and it calls out where in the township we envision multi-use trails, where we envision new roadway connections, which are identified by the black double-headed arrows, where we envision paths, where we envision striped shoulders, bike lanes, where we envision just general roadway widening, which is highlighted in yellow, which focuses on the Route 30 corridor and the Route 29 corridor, and then where we envision intersection improvements, and those are the circles on the plan. And those circles tie back to the township's capital improvement plan through the Act 209 study. So what's starting to happen here is we've got the comp plan, we've got these ordinances, we have the Act 209 capital improvement plan, and a lot of these documents are now being tied together for consistency. And this really just is a map. It's a planning tool, but it's also a map that has certain, it gives the township certain legal standing to obtain the necessary land to accommodate these improvements, or if a developer were to build on a piece of property, it gives us the ability to have a conversation with that developer to enhance implementing these improvements. So it just gives us some legal positioning with regard to implementing infrastructure improvements. Over time, the official map can be updated. It has to go through a whole separate process, and we're really not talking about that tonight, but there's a separate process for advertising and ultimately has to be adopted, I believe, by ordinance. This is, and it can be expanded in the future, and it can show other infrastructure improvements in the future. So with that, I'm through my presentation. Be happy to take any questions.
Okay. We have questions from the board up here?
There's no reference to anything pertaining to utilizing bollards for protection. Bollards. For example, like when you talked about the Stevens Antique property where the verge is going to be removed, and you've got children walking along the sidewalk.
Right.
Is there ever a point where you consider using those to protect residents while they're walking? Or
So PennDOT is really picky about the use of bollards because they become, if the real intent is to protect sort of the roadside, you're looking at guide rail. Bollards, PennDOT's not really interested in having bollards in the public right-of-way. It becomes a fixed object, and it becomes a maintenance issue. If the road's designed properly, it's safe to walk on a sidewalk, and there are sidewalks up against the edge of road all over the place. It doesn't prevent accidents from occurring, but whether it's a sidewalk up against the curb or if there's a 4-foot verge, there's not much of a difference there in terms of protecting the pedestrian. And I would say that's not a reason, and I don't think you're suggesting this, it's not a reason not to build the sidewalk. But in terms of providing some physical barrier between the sidewalk and the road edge, I think the best option would be guide rail in that situation. But even then, if it's a state road, I'm not sure that PennDOT would approve it. We would have other authority on township roads, but I think it might only be necessary on on a case-by-case basis. I wouldn't recommend it as a blanket requirement. Yeah.
Okay. Question. You want to come up and speak up here?
Loudly enough so you could all hear me. Helen Reel again. Question on bicycles per se, that there are, yes, requirements for we can all share the road. However, twice I have just about been run over by bicyclists, no bell, no nothing, and that suddenly come upon you. So, what are the requirements for a bicycle? Do they need to use hand signals? There are no bells. There are no warning signs that they're coming up and just about running you over. That's one thing. And I would love to be able to bike from my home along King Road and hitch up to a rail. I can't. I take my life in my hand if I want to get from King Circle to down here to hitch up to the path. I have to put my bike in my car. I got to drive here, leave it here, etc. I would dearly love to have a sidewalk that I could walk or bike on. Thank you.
We're trying to get them put in. I don't know anything about bicycle rules, though.
I don't know the laws as to a bicyclist, as to what they're required to do. I think it's more of a common courtesy than I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know.
Chris might know.
Bicycles have to abide by the same rules that cars have to. They have to signal, they have to stay within a lane, and so forth. Recently, there's been some changes that give bicyclists a little more right-of-way. Well, I'm just talking about, but logically, you're supposed to give them like 4 feet or something. You're supposed to stay 4 feet away. That's the latest law. But logically, if you're on a bicycle, you have to assume, that a car is at least a ton. So whether they have the real right-of-way, when they hit you, they win. So I mean, that's kind of putting it like that's just how it works. But honestly, all bicyclists are supposed to give hand signals, legitimate ones, and let you know where they're going and put their hand up and let you know if they're, or if it's at night, they have to have lights and things like that.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me? Okay. When you live next to the road and you need, or are you going to be putting a bike lane in, will they take part of your property? Is that what you're meaning legally? You could, I'm off of 352. I do see bicyclists and people running that road. So I didn't know if that was one of the roads you had in mind.
So the short answer is, according to the official map as currently written, we do not envision bike lanes on 350. It's on the official map.
Okay. Can I have a copy?
Not yet. I'm sure that'll be available when it's not even up for adoption.
Come on up.
What was it about, what, widening? Well, it's no different than any other road widening. If a road improvement requires right-of-way, then there's a process to follow for right-of-way acquisition. I mean, that's really not, that's getting very specific, and, you know, unless I know the certain situation, I wouldn't know if right-of-way would be required, but, I don't know the answer.
These would be for new projects. I mean,
Yeah.
anything that would affect an existing property would be sort of on a case-by-case basis for that specific project. This would just be for new projects,
Well,
generally
it could
speaking.
apply, and it's largely intended for new projects, but we do envision bike lanes on some existing roads. For example, we're identifying bike lanes along Valley Stream Parkway and Liberty Boulevard. Now, those roads are very wide, and that's probably why they were identified for bike lanes, is because those roads it may very well be possible to restripe those roads and provide a bike lane without any significant impact. But if a bike lane were identified for a road, and if the road needed to be widened and it required right-of-way, there's a process that would have to be pursued. But I can't tell you today that there's any need for right-of-way for any of the roads that we've identified for bike lanes, but I'm also not saying there is or there isn't at this point.
Yes, Martin Lutz, Lap Road. Zach, if you go back to one of the first slides that talked about single access roads, I'd like to address one aspect of what's been presented tonight. Yes, that's the slide. If you read this, you'll notice that it says a single access street shall not be approved wherever a through street is feasible. What strikes me about this is the absolute nature of that statement, where it doesn't provide the board with discretion. I can see situations, well, first of all, if you look at that, it says if a developer comes into the township and says, look, this through street is feasible, then he has to put it in. And if you read that, it says a single access street shall not be approved when a through street is feasible. So why is that such an absolute, the wording is so absolute and it doesn't provide the board with discretion? I can see situations where a large tract of land, a developer comes in, he wants to put a through street in, and it's not to the best interest of the township because at one end is an industrial business office complex area, on the other end it's all residential. You can't say to that developer, well, you have to make it single access. He says, well, no, it's feasible to put a through street in, and he has the upper hand on you. Let me give you a concrete example of what I'm talking about. It's hitting home for a large number of residential areas where I live, in the Mill Lane area.
Hey, Marty, I don't want to cut you off. Can I point you to subsection D? So that's subsection A. In D, it says the board shall consider the existing or proposed uses of adjoining lands, topography, drainage, or other relevant site characteristics affecting cul-de-sac design, unless future extension is clearly impracticable or undesirable based on the foregoing considerations, or is precluded by the board, which they shall have discretion to do so. The turnaround, right-of-way, cul-de-sac, et cetera, shall be carried to the property. So basically, it's outlining instances or considerations that the board may make that may not.
Talking about cul-de-sacs. It's not talking about. I'm talking about through street, where you don't want a through street because it's not in the best interest of the township. That's not clear to me at all. I think you're comparing apples and oranges here.
Right. I guess what I'm wondering is if maybe that some of that same language could be carried through to through streets. I think that was the intent.
That's where I'm leading.
Yeah.
I think this has to be qualified to the point where it gives the board some discretion in situations where a through street is not to the best interest of the township, but that developer now can point to this as it's written and say, no, it's feasible, I can do it. Let me give you a concrete example, and I won't dwell on this, but as you know, a large number of neighborhoods in my area, on Lap Road, Mill, are being faced with a developer who's proposing the development of the 170-acre Knickerbocker site, most of which is business, office park, etc. What he has proposed to the neighbors, he made a presentation, is to put a through street all the way from the Route 29 area where the golf course is. That through street would go through most of that business office park area and wind up connecting to Mill Lane, which is right in the middle of a residential area. There's probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 residential neighborhoods in this area. And it's not too far from where we are right now, Mill Lane, so by the firehouse. Now, the local neighborhoods did an informal poll recently, and I won't dwell on this, but this poll was provided to the township back in November. It was over 100 residents. And I just want to read 2 parts from that to stress what I'm getting at here. The first part of the informal poll, it lists 9 reasons that the neighbors came up with why the proposed development was not in the best interest of the township. And number 2 states this: the adverse traffic impact from proposed road connections to Mill Lane, particularly on the residential neighborhood surrounding Mill Lane 401 intersection. And then at the very end here, under the summary, it says, the site should be developed as currently zoned, particularly as it relates to the 35-acre low-density residential portion, which is contiguous with the Oak Glen and Lap Road R1 residential area. And this is the part I want to stress, and that there should not be any ingress or egress from Mill Lane. And underlying that concern is this through road connection. Basically, you'd be connecting the eastern end of the township with all the business, office park, commercial, et cetera, and bringing a through road and dumping it right into the center of the township in a primary, a large residential area. And that just doesn't make any sense. So consider that in light of this statement. I think either this statement should be taken out or it should be appropriately qualified to provide the board with discretion where if it believes a through road is not in the best interest of the township, you have discretion in saying, no, you nix it. So your thoughts would be appreciated.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to qualify it. I mean, I think we have the power anyway, but the more language to help us, the better.
Great.
I agree.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Anybody else want to speak? Okay, come on up.
Carol Rapp. I have, again, on that first slide, the builder may think that it's feasible to put a through street to connect up to what on the other side is a cul-de-sac. And I don't think they should have that right to do that because the people who are on that cul-de-sac side moved there because there is a cul-de-sac there, because they don't want through traffic. So again, I just want to reiterate that just because a through street could be put in doesn't mean it should. You really have to consider the neighborhood that's on the other side. Prime example, Bishop 2. The other thing I have a question about, one of your slides said traffic signs need to be 6 feet from the edge of the road. So does that mean a stop sign now is 6 feet into somebody's property? I don't know what that meant.
No.
So what do you mean by traffic signs? Maybe you don't mean the stop sign kind of signs, but maybe you mean the...
Street name sign?
Oh, street name. Oh, I wasn't even thinking that. But still, 6 feet in is pretty far in.
I'm not sure that it was.
And then while you're looking, yeah, it did say 6 feet. Can somebody give me an example of a private road? So I can understand when you say it has to be held to the public road standards. I'm curious if you can tell me what a private road is. So
Great Valley Parkway on the east side of
But it's an industrial, so what about a private road in a residential area? Do we have any?
Celia Tract, Cockerham Tract.
Yeah, all of that water is private roads. So a lot of the townhouse communities
Okay.
are private roads. The township does not.
But like my road,
maintain.
Village Way is not a private road, right?
No, that's a public.
No, that's public.
Okay,
That's
I
owned
just
by the
wanted,
town.
okay.
That's a typo, and thank you
Oh.
for catching that. It's 2 feet from the edge of pavement.
That
not
makes
6
more
feet.
sense. I just thought 6 feet's pretty far in.
I did too, and I didn't look at it closely enough,
Okay.
so I apologize.
Okay,
Thank you.
no, that's good. And I think you clarified when you were talking about curbed with parking that it could be 9 to 10 feet. And then my question was going to be, are you talking specifically about roads where it's designated parking? And again, I live on a public road. People park on both sides. I don't know what the width of my road is. I couldn't begin to tell you, but there's no designated parking, but people park on both sides. And when you're directly across, one vehicle is about all that can fit. A school bus can barely fit.
What's your question?
So my question is, you're not talking about that where there's parking allowed, it's going to be marked parking, right?
No, generally on local and residential subdivision streets, it's allowed, but it wouldn't.
Okay,
you
good.
would
That's what I
typically
want to
only
make
see it
sure of.
striped on your.
Okay, all right. And then, oh, my last one was a shared lane. I think you said when it's 35 miles per hour or less, and it's going to be a shared lane, that signage thing with the bike
Yeah,
and
yes.
the, so are you saying now on my road, because it's 25 miles an hour, we'll now have those things all through it?
No,
Okay.
again, it would only be for any, and I don't know that we have any roads identified in the township for that treatment.
Mhm.
But if over time the township is building out its bike and pedestrian network, and we want to connect sort of a bike route, let's say it connects through an existing road, and it's a road that's a low-volume road, it's a low-speed road, no need to widen the road to build a lane, a bike
Mhm.
lane. Maybe we'll designate that for a shared.
Okay, but it's because it's specifically
It's
trying
on
to.
a specific route.
Okay.
We're not going to go back and retrofit every
That's
road
what I thought.
35 miles an
Okay.
hour and less with.
And that's what I
shared.
thought, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure I
No, good
understood it
question.
right.
Good
Okay.
question.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? That was very thorough, Chris. Anything? Anything?
No.
All right, so you had comments. Did you need anything else tonight?
No, Zach, I think we're good for tonight.
Yeah, I think the next steps is we have some comments we got from the County Planning Commission who they actually are pretty hot on this. They think they'll probably borrow a lot of it for their model ordinance for the county, but which I think speaks to Chris's points. This is a good step forward for it. But we do have some comments and some cleanup items, I would say. Aside from that, I think we'll take it back to the planning commissions and kind of open it up to the, run it through the rest of the normal ordinance process. We just wanted to give you, I know last month it was kind of like, wow, this is a lot to digest. Let's get it straight from the experts, so.
Great. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we're moving on to the consent agenda. So I will just run through this. Unless somebody has a question, stop me. First is approving the meeting minutes from March 13th. I did make a minor edit, which we talked about on that.
Right.
Acceptance of the treasurer's report. We looked at that. Looked pretty good. Yeah. Ratified the payment of bills, $1,233,108.79.
Yeah. I didn't see the list in there. Was the detail list in the package this
Yeah, I didn't
time?
see the packet, the detail either.
Want to send it around? Tomorrow.
Let's take that off this consent since we didn't actually see it.
No,
Okay.
Not tonight, yes.
I mean, the bills get paid anyway, right?
Right,
So-
it's already paid.
It's already
Right,
paid,
yeah,
so
right,
it's,
yeah.
all right.
So you probably would like to make a motion to amend the agenda to remove that from the consent agenda.
We'll take that off. Do I need to make a motion? All
To
right.
amend the agenda, yes.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to remove 6C, the ratification of the payment of bills. We're removing that from the consent agenda.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approve Host Municipality Resolution 28-2019 for Immaculata University Redevelopment Assistance Capital. That's generally called a RACP grant. Immaculata is doing some track work, and we made a resolution to support them in their request for money for the track. Approve tri-party cooperation agreement. Is this the same thing? Also track?
Yeah, I would say it's an additional, so the host agreement says that, that we supported, and as like a taxing agency, we're technically responsible if Immaculata were to not pay it. We are indemnified through that host agreement and through that resolution, but this is sort of an additional agreement, tri-party with the Health and Education Authority and with Immaculata to just make sure that all those costs for this project are borne by basically anybody but us.
Anybody but us.
Yeah,
That's good.
the other parties.
Okay, that's good. All right. Ratify the proposal from the Vanguard Modular Building Systems for $129,781. This is to get us some, what would you call it? Kind of a trailer modular unit.
Additional office space for the next 3 years.
Yeah, we're going to have some very attractive modular building at the end of the building because we are really out of space. Ratify the lease agreement. That's related to the same thing. Ratify the lease agreement. So we're going to install it for $129, and then we'll pay a monthly lease of $1,493 a month for the 3 years. Approve our social media policy. You guys all read that now? We're all good? Okay. Good. Approve our tuition reimbursement policy. We've never had one before, have we?
We have it in some of the labor contracts, but this is exclusively for the non-union employees. So you are correct.
Okay.
Comment on that. I don't know if it's an error or if I'm misreading this, but on page 29 of our slides, there's tuition reference that reimbursement can be up to 100%. However, when you go down to the maximum reimbursement paragraph, the maximum amount is 80% will be made for a B grade or 70% for C grade. So I don't know if that's...
Yeah, that 100%, up to 100% needs to be stricken from the draft.
Some needs to be shared.
Yeah, it's an 80% for a C, for a B, and a 70% for a C.
Right, so 100% should...
With caps on, dollar caps on semester and annual reimbursement.
Right.
So do we want to approve that tonight or approve it with the changes we just talked about?
I would recommend that we approve it with changes we just talked about. This has been
It's been around for a
quite
while.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll approve that with the changes as spoken about. Approve the water service termination agreement with Aqua PA. I understand that's pretty much Aqua's standard. We don't have a lot of choice in that, right? Ratify getting Microsoft Office 365 for the police department at $2,880 a year annually. Approve agreements with KeyBank for key capture, remote deposit, wire transfer, and cash management. Just being able to use KeyBank's functionality. Resolution to approve destruction of specific archive records. When I looked at the list, it was mostly financial records from 10 years ago. So we're keeping everything we have to and just getting rid of stuff we don't need, really old stuff, okay? And that was it on the consent agenda. Make a motion to approve consent agenda?
Yeah, I'll make that motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And one last announcement. We had an executive session on March 26th at 3 o'clock to discuss personnel, legal, and real estate matters, and a very short one just on April 10th for personnel issues.
That is correct.
Okay.
That was at 6:30.
6:30. It was 6:30, yes, just before we got here. And we actually finished in 15 minutes, so it didn't take long. So now we're just, there's no other business, open for public comment. Anything not on the agenda? Come on up.
I'm Tim Caban, 1050 West King Road, and I'm here to make a brief presentation to you on this simple board so everybody can understand it about what should be done at 352 and King Road. So, here I have a, let me make sure I'm holding it the right way. Yeah, so this is King Road, it's Immaculata over there. This is King Road, there's Malvern over there. This is 352, there's 30 down there, and this is 352, and that's East Goshen up there, okay? As it exists today, King Road goes for 20 seconds. There's a 3-second break. Then King Road goes for 20 seconds. There's a 3-second break. And then both directions of 352 go at the same time. There's only one primary problem with this intersection, and it's the fact that for people on 352 to make a left, you can see where the stop line is. And the stop line is. So it's a very long left that they have to make to get over to King Road. And likewise here, it's a very long left over here. And as a result, those two people cross. And it creates a lot of congestion. So what is the solution? It's very simple. Each direction in its own turn. King Road goes, 352 goes, 352 goes. If you do that, then each lane will totally empty out. It will empty out straight to the right to the left. It will empty out straight to the right to the left. That will solve the primary problem at King Road. Now, on 352. It doesn't totally solve everything because there's also a nuisance factor, which I would not categorize as a primary safety concern. But it is people making rights on red at different places. The primary place that it's a hindrance is when this direction starts going and you have people going straight and they have carte blanche, right? There's no other opposing traffic. They're going straight. Somebody starts to make a right and the person making a right here conflicts with them. Or they're going straight and the person making a right here conflicts with them. It's a rare thing and it's a nuisance because I don't say it's dangerous because you can see. Everybody sees each other. There's not really a risk to crashing. Okay? The reason so simply by doing the 1, 1, 1, 1, everybody in its own turn, you would at most delay the intersection by 30 seconds. And I regularly sit for 30 seconds at various intersections all over the place. If you wanted to improve that, everybody sees these white squares that are popping up on different traffic circles that are clearly smart features. I don't know exactly how they work, but I know that one perfect example of how the white squares work is on Phoenixville Pike at King Road. And it was a new intersection last June, a new traffic light. It had never had traffic lights before. And I initially lamented the traffic light when it put in because I always go down there to get on Phoenixville Pike to go out to Downingtown. But it is like butter. It's terrific. And the reason is that the white boxes, the white squares, can tell, apparently, how many people are in the lane. So it lets all the traffic come through that is, and then it shuts the lane. As opposed to saying these two here, you might say, okay, well, in the morning, we're going to have all the traffic here. These people are going to get 40 seconds, and they're going to get 20. And at night, they're going to get 40, and they're going to get 20. But it's not always true. And so those white squares would be a terrific addition. Yeah, they're expensive, but they're a lot cheaper than the two plans that are proposed between East Goshen and East Whiteland. The two plans that are proposed are turning lanes in some form or fashion. I can't tell you because I've never seen the plan. And the other one is a traffic circle, which to me is asinine. And the traffic circle would consume, it would take 2 to 3 houses by eminent domain and put 2 to 3 families in our township out on their ass. And it's not okay. So that's why I want to come down here and display this on the record, on camera, so that no one can say that they don't know, that they didn't understand it, that they didn't hear about it. okay? The second question I have is, can I see the plan, please, for the traffic circle and for the turning lanes, and not just me? So just so you know, I'm 1050 West King Road, which is right at this intersection. I'm not the house on the corner, which is 3 Tons Tavern, which is a historic house. I'm not any of the ones directly on there. But what do you know? East Goshen, who's a partner here, shows the plan to their residents. And what did the resident say? He said, well, because they want to save 3 Ton Tavern, the traffic circle is going to be in the entrance. Part of it will be in the entrance to Lockwood Chase, that development right now. And that regrading the intersection will necessitate a significant retaining wall that I'll be looking at out my front window. So from my personal perspective, I'd like to see the plan. But I also want to know if you can share that with the public, because people might be interested to see it. Are you willing to share the plan?
I think it's still with the plan.
Didn't we direct a month ago to go ahead and do a plan, I thought? Sure. Yeah, we haven't seen it either.
We can speak up there.
So we were directed, I'm not sure, maybe a month or so ago, to prepare an updated concept plan. We're not in detailed engineering, we're at a conceptual phase, and we are looking at 2 alternatives. And so we've updated the concept plan for both scenarios, both options, and that information was submitted as a first draft to East Whiteland and East Goshen not long ago, a week or so ago. So it's a draft document that's recently prepared, and so really it hasn't even had full level of staff review at this point. And I think one of the next steps in the process is to convene a meeting between the 2 townships and discuss what our next steps are.
What do you think about the timing ideas that were just mentioned? Is that feasible?
So, we could certainly factor that in and introduce that as a third option. I have some concerns about the effectiveness of that solution, but it wouldn't be difficult for us to give that solution equal attention and evaluate the effectiveness of that option as well. So we could take a closer look at that. I understand what's being suggested.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because that was one of the other things I would ask, is that it be put on par with any other plan. And not, my concern with this is I first heard about a potential plan in the June meeting of last year, because Sue happened to mention it when somebody was complaining about Carroll Lane. And at the time I said, could you share the plan? And he said, not yet, we're still working on it. And then I asked Zach about it, and he was kind enough to call me back, and he told me about these 2 plans. But I then asked him if I could see the plan, and I never got an answer. So I figured I'd come down here and ask you directly. But the point is, if you've been working on it since June of last year, you said at the time, you said there's 2 plans proposed. And then I read here, I hear this is a week old, and I see this thing that went out in Magazine. It says, intersection improvements studied, and it says, quote, this process is just getting started. Those 2 things they're not consistent, and it makes me question the sincerity of this. And my other concern is that, and I don't know what'll happen until it happens, but my main concern is that there's a plan that's being put forth in secret without input from the residents. And we're going to go along and say, okay, we're doing a plan, it's in draft, and boom, and now it's finalized. And thanks, we'll take some comments, but it's finalized and it's going forward because we've done all this work and we've put in all this work, and so it's going through. And if you look at a couple of things that I initially couldn't understand, one of them is a green arrow on this light. So on this light, about a year ago, somebody put a green arrow here. And at the time I came to this meeting, I said, that did absolutely 0. And it does absolutely 0 if the goal is to affect traffic in any way. but it does exactly what it would need to do if it was engineered failure. And the term for engineered failure, one term I'll throw out, comes to mind, is fraudulent inducement. When you put in things that are designed to fail to justify the larger expense for the future project. Now, I don't know that that happened. I have no idea. But these are the kinds of things that come to mind when we have secret plans and I don't know what's going on. And I live right there. Okay? So I would like to be able to see the plan. And I just kind of don't believe it. I hear, oh, it's a week old. But then what was mentioned in June of last year?
Well, I think you can, but I think the idea that we had a concept in June and then nothing happened, nothing happened for months. It's not like we were working on it diligently every day, every week. Nothing happened until a little earlier this year.
Yeah, so Sue's absolutely correct. There was a period of time where the project essentially was on hold. So where it stands right now, there's two options that have been identified, and they need to be explored further and properly evaluated before any decision can be made. And as of tonight, there'll be three options that we consider. There were two plans back in June, but one of them was much further behind the other plan in terms of the level of thought and time and attention that was given to it. And so both township recognize they're putting a paramount importance in this whole process is working with the community. And so really that's what we're preparing for, is to reach back out to the community and have a discussion about the intersection. But the project did go on hold for several months. It came back to life. We're very interested in addressing and fixing the intersection. And we realized that we're not prepared to go to the public because one of the two plans was not at the same level of detail. We had a lot of questions that we weren't comfortable answering, and we knew that it wasn't ready to go to the public, because if we presented that plan and we couldn't answer the questions, we're not doing our service to have a public meeting. So we're sort of recalibrating, and we're bringing both, although neither of them are fully engineered, they're not even preliminarily engineered. They're both conceptual, but they're now at a point, as of about a week or two ago, where they're at the same level of conceptual engineering. And so the next step in the process is to get the two municipalities together to discuss the two plans, now that we know a little bit more about the conceptual level of engineering, and to begin planning our outreach to the community to have a discussion about the intersection and what the improvements should be for the intersection. So really, we're taking it very slowly and very carefully, because when we go to the public, it's all because we want to go to the public. We want to do so in a way that's thoughtful. That's really what it comes down to. In terms of fraudulent engineering, never heard that term. I can assure you that that's not the case. If we could find an effective solution that did not require physically widening the intersection, and we could solve the intersection by just retiming the signal or changing out the signal equipment, that would be our preferred solution. I think the situation you're referring to, I don't remember exactly, but I think the green arrow was introduced on the westbound or eastbound approach of King Road. I think that was just simply done to better communicate to the motorists that are traveling on that leg of King Road that it is split phase, meaning when they get the green signal, they're free to make a left turn, and they can do so safely without any opposing traffic, because that's what the green arrow means. When you get a green arrow, it means you're able to make that turn and there is no conflicting flow. So I think it was just done really to bring the intersection as it operates today up to sort of minimum safe standards. If we can find a signal solution, we all will be happy. Exactly.
Is the meeting with East Goshen, East Whiteland, is PennDOT there too? Are they part of it?
So this next meeting is really between the two municipalities to talk about conceptual plans, and then how do we want to go back out to the community. We have had one meeting with PennDOT to discuss the intersection and discuss at least what we've identified thus far as solutions. They're on board with the idea of fixing the intersection. They're letting the municipality.
Okay, so I don't know, it's a mystery then how a resident of East Goshen who I talked to saw these plans. Maybe they're not the same plans. Maybe they are. We'll find out when they finally come out. So one last thing I want to read, and I think we need to start asking, too, about the money that's spent and how much money was spent on that Green Arrow. Because to me, it was wasted. But the one thing I want to read is from Title 65, which is Chapter 7, Section 702 of the PA Code. And this is the Sunshine Act law, I believe. And it says legislative findings. Finding, the General Assembly finds that the right of the public to be present at all meetings of agencies and to witness the deliberation, policy formulation, and decision-making of agencies is vital to the enhancement and proper functioning of the democratic process, and that secrecy in public affairs undermines effectiveness in fulfilling its role in a democratic society. I would appreciate, as somebody who lives in that intersection, and all my neighbors, being included and knowing what's going on, because people have good ideas. This is not my individual idea. A lot of people have said this. I'm just the person who came down here to the meeting. But if you talk to all the people that live around there, they'll tell you this. And they might tell you other things that I haven't said. So I think it would really be a benefit to work more cooperatively and less behind the scenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That was very helpful. Any other public comment? Any other issues? Come on up.
I want to second when he said going and taking away from people's property should be our last resort, not our first. But I'm here because I understand there was a meeting with the Open Space Committee where a map was presented of open space that didn't accurately portray open space in the township, that a lot of the properties identified were actually private property. Can you address that?
Yeah, the map that we had, essentially it was a GIS query. So it's a mapping query of all properties that were over a certain size. That's the only analysis that went into that map.
Well, my understanding was it was presented by somebody who was on that committee and at that meeting. She's not here tonight, but she was telling a group of us that it was presented that this was the open space in the township. And then it turns out very little of what was on that map is actually open space for the township, because you can't consider somebody's private property open space. So
I'm not sure if I entirely agree with that part of the statement, but I get what you're saying. Generally, the idea behind that map was let's find all the big parcels that don't have either a development on them or they're
But
not.
what was the point of that? I mean, it's private property. It doesn't mean that we can say, oh, we have all this open land. It's private property.
The point of the map was to find all the big properties to figure out if there was a way to work with the property owner, whether they're institutional, private, public, however, to see if there's a way to preserve it, whether it's through purchase is only one mechanism for preserving open space. There's all sorts of other legal tools for that. So the idea was let's find all the big parcels that don't already have buildings all over them and see what opportunities there may be for open space preservation. That's the extent of the thought that went into that map.
I will add, the idea was to go.
Were you at the meeting?
Yes, I'm
Because
I'm the liaison
from the
on
person who
the.
reported to us, she was pretty PO'd about how everything was presented. She thought it was, yeah, pretty inaccurate, so.
Well, I don't think there was a whole lot of, I would say like a lot of decision making that went into the map itself. It was quite literally a query of large parcels. That's the starting point. That's where you start for a plan like this, and you refine it from there.
Yeah,
Some of them may
Carol,
not
if I
really
could
been
just
viable.
interject, that's actually a pretty common practice in most municipalities. The open space committees will develop a plan of potential acquisition for properties that are privately owned. I'm not familiar with the map that we're talking about here tonight, but it is a pretty common practice.
It's the first step of looking at everything from a high level at this point in time.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to share that from her perspective, she thought it was very misleading with how it was presented to that committee, so. And I don't know, Barbara, and maybe when we have our meeting, we can talk to the folks who were there. I don't think you were there, were you? Were you at that meeting when they yeah,
No.
the one that just happened?
Yeah, no, Barbara Antha, Parks and Rec. No, I wasn't at the open space meeting, but just to reiterate my understanding of this, there might be some confusion with your friend and colleague that perhaps they think that the township will take this private land. That's not the case. It's to look at the whole township and determine where there is space that doesn't have a building on it, or doesn't have a swamp on it, or maybe it has a swamp, or, you know, or doesn't have some sort of something on it, to look holistically at the entire township to say, oh, there's swatches of properties here and there. We might be able to say, we would be interested in purchasing that swatch of land if it's in an area where we don't have green and we don't have
Okay.
open space.
Okay.
Would that be a way to
Is that,
explain it? Okay.
okay, good,
Yeah.
thank you.
And we did, Scott and Chuck did have their binder from the Open Space Committee at the Parks and Rec meeting. That was the binder that we passed around. And that meeting is the first Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock here, and the public is welcome to attend that meeting. They're having those meetings every month. The next one being the public meeting that will be at the church for the
Yeah.
Places of the Heart. Thank you. I
Yeah.
couldn't remember the name of it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The only other thing I wanted to ask about, if you guys have any update on the potential for a train station? No update? Because I think that's come up in conversation, so I thought I would just ask about it. Okay.
Okay, anything else from anybody? All right then, seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.